Story 1.
I spent 41 years measuring land for a living. 41 years walking property lines, reading deeds, driving stakes into dirt, and telling people exactly where their world ended and someone else's began. So when I tell you I know where my property line sits, understand that I don't mean it the way most people do. I don't mean I have a general sense. I mean I could walk it blindfolded at midnight and plant a flag within a quarter inch of the iron pin. That's why what Dale Puckett did to me wasn't just theft. It was an insult. I retired in 2019. Bought 23 acres outside Waynesboro, Tennessee, Lawrence County, right where the hills start folding into each other like knuckles. The place had a 1940s farmhouse, a good well, and silence so deep you could hear your own blood moving. My wife Carol had passed 2 years before. I wasn't looking for a fresh start. I was looking for a place to be still. And for about 14 months, that's exactly what I got. Then Dale moved in next door. He bought the adjacent parcel 30 acres in March of 2021. At first, I thought he was running a small hobby kennel. A few dogs, some fencing, nothing to lose sleep over. But by summer, the barking was constant. Not a few dogs. Dozens. He was running a commercial breeding operation, French bulldogs from what I could tell, and he was scaling fast. New kennel buildings went up. Gravel pads got poured. Trucks started coming and going at all hours. I didn't love it, but it was his land. I minded my own business. Then one morning in October, I walked my east fence line the way I always did, coffee in hand, just checking things, and I stopped. The fence was wrong. Not dramatically wrong. Not obviously wrong. But wrong in the way that only a man who spent 4 decades measuring the earth would notice. The chain link fence Dale had installed along our shared boundary wasn't where the old post and wire fence had been. It was south, into my property. I eyeballed it at 6 to 8 feet, a strip running nearly 400 linear feet along the line. That's roughly 3,000 square feet of my land, just absorbed into his operation, like it had always been his. He'd even poured a concrete pad for a new kennel building that was sitting partially on my dirt. I walked over that afternoon, knocked on his door, kept it neighborly, told him I thought his fence crew might have made an error, that the line looked off, and I'd be happy to show him the survey markers. Dale leaned against his doorframe, arms crossed, and smiled at me. "Fence is where my guys put it," he said. "If you've got a problem, call the county." So I did. And that's when I learned how things actually work. When you're a 70-year-old man living alone in rural Tennessee, the county code enforcement office told me boundary disputes were civil matters. The zoning office confirmed Dale had pulled permits for agricultural structures, which in Lawrence County covers commercial breeding operations with almost no oversight. The sheriff's office said they couldn't get involved in a property line disagreement without a court order. Everyone was polite. Everyone was sympathetic. And every single one of them told me it was my problem to solve. Dale, meanwhile, had already started running dogs on the stolen strip. He knew exactly what he'd done. He was betting that a retired old man wouldn't have the energy or the money to fight him. He bet wrong. I pulled my original deed and survey from when I purchased the property. I confirmed every pin, every bearing, every distance. Then I hired a licensed surveyor, a younger guy I'd mentored years ago, and had him do a full boundary survey with GPS-corrected coordinates. The result was exactly what I knew it would be. Dale's fence encroached between 7 feet 8 inches and 8 feet 2 inches onto my parcel, along the entire shared boundary. His concrete pad for the new kennel sat 22 inches onto my land. I sent Dale a certified letter with the survey attached, demanding he remove the fence and structures within 30 days. He never responded. So I escalated. I bought a drone. Nothing fancy, a DJI Mini, perfectly legal for recreational use over my own property. I started documenting everything. The encroachment, the number of dogs, the waste runoff that was draining toward my pasture, the trucks coming at 2 and 3 in the morning. I logged dates, times, license plates. I photographed every square foot of that stolen strip from the air, time-stamped and geotagged. I built a file like I was prosecuting a federal case because I knew that when I finally walked into a courtroom, I was only going to get one clean shot. But the drone footage gave me something I hadn't expected. Dale's operation was bigger than what was visible from the road. He had over 60 dogs in various enclosures, many of them in conditions that would make your stomach turn. Stacked crates, standing water, dogs that hadn't seen a veterinarian in God knows how long. I reported it to animal control. They did an inspection, cited him for minor violations, and gave him 60 days to correct. He corrected just enough to pass a follow-up. The system was designed to give people like Dale every possible chance. While I waited for my attorney to file the boundary action, I did something else. Something that changed everything. I went to the Lawrence County Register of Deeds and pulled the complete chain of title for both properties going back to their common origin. My parcel and Dale's had been part of the same farm until 1946, when the original owner subdivided and sold them separately. And in that 1946 deed, the one that created Dale's parcel, there was a restrictive covenant. It was one sentence buried in the legal description, written in the kind of language nobody uses anymore. It said the property was conveyed subject to the condition that it be used solely for residential and traditional agricultural purposes, and that any commercial enterprise conducted on the premises would constitute a violation entitling the grantor or his successors and assigns to pursue all available remedies, including forfeiture. I read that sentence 11 times. Then I called my attorney. Now, deed covenants from the 1940s don't always hold up. Courts have relaxed enforcement of many of them over the decades, especially ones tied to racial restrictions or outdated land use concepts. But this one was different. It was a clear, specific use restriction tied to the character of the land, and Tennessee courts have consistently upheld those when they run with the land, and subsequent buyers have constructive notice, which Dale did because the covenant was recorded in his chain of title. He either didn't read his deed, or he didn't think anyone would ever find it. Either way, it was his problem now. My attorney filed 2 actions simultaneously. The first was a straightforward boundary encroachment suit, seeking removal of the fence and structure's damages for trespass and an injunction. The second was an action to enforce the restrictive covenant, seeking to shut down the commercial breeding operation entirely. Dale hired a lawyer out of Columbia. They filed an answer claiming the covenant was abandoned and unenforceable due to changed conditions in the area. The judge didn't buy it. The area hadn't changed. It was still rural, residential, and small-scale agricultural, exactly as it had been in 1946. There were no other commercial operations within a mile. Dale's own real estate listing when he bought the property described it as a quiet rural homestead. His own purchase documents undermined his defense. The court ruled in my favor on both counts. Dale was ordered to remove the encroaching fence and all structures from my property within 45 days. He was ordered to pay damages for the trespass and my survey and legal costs. And the court enforced the restrictive covenant, ordering him to cease all commercial breeding operations on the property. That last part is what broke him. His entire investment, the kennel, buildings, the infrastructure, the breeding stock, the business he'd built, was predicated on operating from that location. Without it, he had nothing but 30 acres of land with buildings he couldn't legally use. He tried to appeal. His attorney advised him the chances were slim and the cost would be enormous. Within 3 months, Dale put the property up for sale. But here's the thing about selling land with an active restrictive covenant limiting it to residential and traditional agricultural use: it's not worth what you paid for it. Not even close. He sold at a loss. A significant loss. The new buyers are a young couple who raise goats and keep to themselves. The fence is back where it belongs. The concrete pad is gone. The dogs were rehomed through a rescue organization that got involved after my drone footage made its way to the right people. I sit on my porch now in the evenings and it's quiet again. The kind of quiet Carol would have loved. People ask me if I feel bad about what happened to Dale. If I think I went too far. I measured land for 41 years. I know exactly how far is too far. Dale went 8 feet past it.
Story 2.
I spent 9 years paying off that house by myself. 9 years of crawling through attics in July, rewiring panels in basements that smelled like mold, and regret pulling overtime shifts so I could make double payments and shave years off the mortgage. I bought that house when I was 26 with nothing but a journeyman's license and a stubbornness my mother always said would either save me or kill me. Turns out she was half right. My sister Denise called me on a Tuesday in March, crying so hard I could barely understand her. Marcus had left. Moved out while she was at work, took the flat screen, the good pots, even the shower curtain. She was 41 years old, sitting on the floor of an empty apartment with a lease she couldn't afford alone. And I did what any brother would do. I said, "Come, stay with me. I've got the basement." It's finished, got its own bathroom, even a little kitchenette I'd put in when I thought about renting it out. A few weeks, I told her. Until you get on your feet? She said she just needed a minute to breathe. That minute lasted 7 months. The first month was fine. Denise kept to herself mostly. She'd come upstairs to cook dinner sometimes, and honestly, it was nice having someone in the house. I'm not going to pretend I wasn't lonely. I work long days, I come home tired, and the silence in that house had started to feel like something physical. So having Denise around, hearing her laugh at something on her phone, smelling coffee already made, when I came down at 5:30, it felt like family. Then things started to shift. It was small at first. I'd come home and there'd be a pair of men's Timberlands by the back door. Size 13. Denise wears a 7. I asked her about it, casual, no accusation. She said her friend Terrell had stopped by to help her move some boxes around. Fine. Then the Timberlands were there again. And again. Then I found a razor in the basement bathroom that wasn't mine, and a stick of men's deodorant in the medicine cabinet, Old Spice Fiji. I don't use Old Spice. I went downstairs one Saturday morning to grab my toolbox from the storage closet, and there was Terrell shirtless eating cereal on my couch, watching my cable like he'd been living there his whole life. He didn't even look up. Just said, "What's good, bro?" I pulled Denise aside that afternoon. I kept my voice level. I said, "Niece, you can't move someone into my house without telling me. That's basic respect." She got defensive immediately. Said Terrell was just staying over sometimes. Said I was being controlling. Said I was acting like their father, which if you knew our father was the worst thing she could have said to me. I let it go. I shouldn't have, but I let it go. 2 weeks later, I came home from a job site in Dearborn and my key didn't work in the back door. I stood there for a full minute, turning that key, thinking something was jammed. Then I walked around to the front. Same thing. New lock. New deadbolt. Brass, not the nickel finish I'd installed myself. I had to ring my own doorbell. Denise opened the door like nothing was wrong. Said the old lock was sticking and Terrell had replaced it for safety. Handed me a new key like she was doing me a favor. I took that key and something in my chest went cold. But I didn't explode. I just said, "Don't ever change the locks on my house again." She rolled her eyes. Rolled her eyes. In my house that I paid for with my hands? Then came the phone call from my mother. Mama called me on a Sunday and her voice had that tone, that quiet, careful tone she uses when she thinks she's talking to someone fragile. She asked how I was doing. Was I sleeping okay? Was I eating? Had I thought about talking to someone? I said, "Ma, what are you talking about?" She said Denise had told her I'd been acting erratic. That I was drinking, that I'd been aggressive toward Terrell, that she was scared to be in the house with me. I have never put my hands on anyone. I have never had a drinking problem. I go to work, I come home, I watch the Lions lose, and I go to bed. That is my life. And my own sister was sitting in my basement telling my 73-year-old mother that I was dangerous. I drove to my mother's house that night. I sat at her kitchen table, the same table where I'd done homework as a kid, and I looked her in the eye and told her the truth. Every bit of it. The boyfriend, the locks, the lies. Mama listened. And then she said something that broke me. She said, Denise is going through a hard time. Maybe you should be more patient. More patient. I'd given up my privacy, my peace, my basement, and my good nature for 7 months, and I needed to be more patient. I went home that night and sat in my truck in the driveway for an hour. I looked at that house, the house I'd re-roofed myself, the house where I'd torn out every piece of carpet and laid hardwood on my hands and knees, the house I'd wired and plumbed and painted and bled into. And I made a decision. The next morning I went to the courthouse. I filed a formal eviction notice. 30 days. Everything legal, everything by the book. I had a process server delivered to the basement door while I was at work, because I knew if I handed it to her myself, she'd twist it into something it wasn't. That's when the war started. Denise called everyone. And I mean everyone. My mother. My Aunt Patricia. My cousin Dwayne. My uncle, who I haven't spoken to in 3 years. She called people from church. She posted on Facebook, didn't name me directly, but wrote a long weeping paragraph about how the people you sacrifice everything for will throw you out on the street like garbage. She got 47 comments. Hearts and prayer, hands, and people calling me every name you can think of without ever hearing my side. My cousin Dwayne showed up at my door. Said I was wrong for putting family out. Said blood is thicker than water. I told him, blood doesn't change your locks and lie to your mother. He said I was being petty. My Aunt Patricia left me a voicemail so vicious I saved it, just in case I ever need to remind myself what conditional love sounds like. And my mother stopped answering my calls. For 2 weeks. The woman who raised me, who I drive to every doctor's appointment, who I check on 3 times a week, she just went silent. Because Denise had gotten to her first. Because the story was already written before I ever got a chance to speak. The 30 days passed. Denise didn't leave. I had to get the sheriff involved. A deputy came to my house on a Thursday morning, and I stood in my own living room and watched my sister carry her things out in garbage bags while Terrell loaded them into a truck he'd borrowed from someone. She didn't look at me. Not once. But as she walked out the front door, she stopped and said loud enough for the deputy and the neighbors to hear, "I hope you're happy. You just lost your family." And here's the thing. She was right. At least partly. My mother didn't speak to me for 2 months. When she finally did, it was stiff and careful, like she was talking to a stranger. My aunt still hasn't come around. Half my family looks at me like I committed a crime. Denise moved in with Terrell's mother across town and has apparently told everyone she's the victim of a cruel, unstable man who kicked his own sister to the curb. But I changed those locks back. I installed the ones I wanted, nickel finish, same as before. I sat in my living room that first quiet night, and I won't lie to you, I cried. Not because I regretted it, because I mourned it. I mourned the version of my family that I thought I had. The version where doing the right thing for someone means they won't burn your house down from the inside. I still drive my mother to her appointments. I still call 3 times a week, even when she's short with me. I still love my sister, somewhere underneath all the scar tissue. But that house is mine. I earned it with my body and my time and my years. And I will never again apologize for protecting the one thing in this world that I built with my own 2 hands. Not for blood. Not for anyone.
Story 3.
I grew up in that house. I learned to ride a bike in the driveway, broke my collarbone falling out of the elm tree in the backyard. Kissed my first girlfriend on the porch steps when I was 14. My mother died in the upstairs bedroom holding my hand at 6:47 on a Tuesday morning. And 6 months ago, my sister changed the locks on me while I was pulling wire at a commercial site in Aurora. Let me back up. My name's Craig. I'm 41. I'm an electrician in Denver, been licensed for 16 years. I'm not rich, I'm not poor. I drive a 2019 F-150 that's paid off. I own my mother's house, a 3-bedroom ranch in Wheat Ridge, that she left to me and only me in a will she had notarized at her attorney's office 14 months before she passed. There's no ambiguity. There's no gray area. The deed is in my name. The mortgage was paid off in 2018. I pay the property taxes. I pay the insurance. I replaced the furnace last winter with my own hands and $4,000 of my own money. My sister Danielle is 37. She was always the one who needed saving. Bad boyfriends in high school, credit card debt in her 20s, a marriage to a guy named Todd who seemed okay until he wasn't, and a divorce that left her with 2 kids, no job, and an apartment lease she couldn't cover. So when she called me crying in February saying she had nowhere to go, I did what I thought any brother would do. I said, come stay in the basement. I'd finished it out a few years back, carpet drywall, a bathroom with a shower stall. It wasn't luxury, but it was warm and dry and free. I told her a few weeks, maybe a month, until she got on her feet. She said she just needed a little time. I believed her. The first 2 weeks were fine. Danielle was grateful. She cooked dinner a couple times, kept the basement tidy, the kids were polite. Her son Marcus is 9, her daughter Lily is 6. Good kids. Quiet. I liked having them around, honestly. The house had been too silent since Mom died. Then the little things started. Danielle began rearranging the kitchen. Not just moving a mug, she reorganized the entire pantry, bought new shelf liners, threw out spices she said were expired. She put her name on the mailbox next to mine. I noticed but didn't say anything, because I'm not the kind of guy who fights over shelf liners. Then she enrolled Marcus and Lily in the local elementary school. Used my address. Didn't ask me. I found out when a welcome packet showed up in the mail, addressed to the Harmon family. My last name is Harmon. So is hers. She took it back after the divorce. Seeing it printed like that, like we were one household, made something tighten in my chest. But I told myself it was practical. The kids needed school. It was the middle of the year. Fine. Then I left for a 4-day job in Colorado Springs. Commercial retrofit, good money, long hours. I came home on a Thursday night, stuck my key in the front door, and it didn't turn. I stood there on my own porch in the dark holding a key that no longer worked to a house I owned outright. I called Danielle. She answered on the 4th ring, casual as anything, and said, "Oh, I had the locks changed." There was a sketchy guy walking around the neighborhood. "I'll get you a copy of the new key." She didn't get me a copy that night. Or the next day. I slept in my truck in my own driveway. Let me say that again. I slept in my truck. In the driveway. Of my own house. When I finally got inside on Friday afternoon, she handed me a single key like she was doing me a favor. I noticed more changes. My mother's china cabinet had been moved to the garage. Danielle's furniture stuff from her old apartment that had been in a storage unit was now filling the living room. There were framed photos of her kids on the mantle, where my mother's photos used to be. Mom's pictures were in a cardboard box in the hall closet. I said, "Danielle, what is this?" She sat down at the kitchen table, my kitchen table, and said with absolute calm, "Craig, we need to talk about the house." She told me she'd been thinking about it, and she believed Mom always intended for both of us to have the house. She said the will was something I'd influenced because I was the one who drove Mom to the attorney. She said she'd spoken to a lawyer. She said she'd spoken to our Aunt Rita, our Uncle Frank, our cousins. She said they all agreed with her. I felt the floor tilt. Not because of what she was saying, I knew it was nonsense. The will was airtight. Mom left Danielle, her jewelry, her car, and $30,000 from a life insurance policy. She left me the house because I was the one who stayed. I was the one who moved back in when Mom got sick. I was the one who bathed her, changed her sheets, held the bucket when she couldn't make it to the bathroom. Danielle visited twice in 18 months. Twice. But what hit me wasn't the legal argument. It was the realization that she'd been planning this. The school enrollment. The mailbox. The lock change. The furniture. She'd been building a case for residency for some claim of shared ownership, one careful step at a time, while smiling at me over dinner. I told her she needed to leave. I gave her 30 days, which was more than generous. She looked at me and said, "You can't evict me. I live here. I have tenants' rights." She was right about one thing. In Colorado, once someone establishes residency, you can't just throw them out. You have to go through the courts. Even if you own the house. Even if they've never paid a dime of rent. Even if they changed your locks and boxed up your dead mother's photographs. I hired a lawyer. $1,400 as a retainer. He told me the eviction process could take 60 to 90 days, assuming she didn't contest it. And she was going to contest it. Meanwhile, Danielle launched her campaign. She called every family member we had and told them I was trying to throw her and her children onto the street. She said I was selfish. She said Mom would be ashamed. She said I was holding the house over her head to control her. Aunt Rita called me and screamed for 20 minutes. Uncle Frank sent me a text that said, "Your mother didn't raise you to be this kind of man." My cousin Jesse posted on Facebook about how family should take care of family and some people only care about property. Not one of them called to hear my side. Not one. I started recording everything. My lawyer told me to. I documented every conversation, every change she made to the house, every piece of mail she redirected. I found out she'd tried to add herself to the utility accounts. She told the school she was the homeowner. She'd filed a change of address with the post office listing herself as a permanent resident. The court date came in May. Danielle showed up with a legal aid attorney and argued that she had an implied agreement to live in the home, that our mother's verbal wishes superseded the written will, and that removing her would cause irreparable harm to her. Children's education and stability. The judge wasn't having it. He reviewed the will, the deed, the property tax records, the insurance documents. He looked at Danielle's attorney and said there is no ambiguity in this ownership. He granted the eviction. Danielle had 21 days to vacate. She cried in the courtroom. Real tears. And for about 10 seconds I felt like the monster everyone said I was. Then I remembered sleeping in my truck. I remembered my mother's photos in a cardboard box. I remembered the locks. She moved out on day 20. Took everything she'd brought in, plus a few things she hadn't brought in. A set of tools from the garage, a vintage clock that had been my grandmother's. I didn't fight her on it. I just wanted her gone. The family fallout has been permanent. Aunt Rita doesn't speak to me. Uncle Frank sent one more text after the eviction that said, "I hope you're proud of yourself." Jesse blocked me on everything. Danielle moved in with a friend in Lakewood, and from what I hear is telling people I fabricated the will. I changed the locks again. New deadbolts, new knobs, a security camera on the porch. I put my mother's photos back on the mantle. I sat in the living room that first night alone, and I didn't feel victory. I didn't feel relief. I felt the weight of learning something no one teaches you. That the person most capable of taking everything from you isn't a stranger, it's the one you'd never think to lock the door against. I loved my sister. Part of me still does. Buried under all of it. But I will never hand someone a key to my life again and trust that they won't use it to lock me out. The house is quiet now. It's mine. It always was. And some nights, that's enough. Most nights it isn't.
Story 4.
I trusted my sister with my daughter's future, and she fed it to a food truck. That's the version I tell people now because it's easier than explaining the whole thing. Easier than describing what it feels like to sit at your own Thanksgiving table, stuffing still warm in the dish, and watch your entire world crack open on a laptop screen while your sister pours herself another glass of Pinot Grigio like nothing's wrong. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Dana. I'm 41. I've been a single mother since my daughter Lily was 3, which means I've been doing this alone for 15 years in a 2-bedroom house in Westerville, Ohio, working as an office manager at a dental practice. I don't say that for sympathy. I say it so you understand what $47,000 means to someone like me. That wasn't investment money. That wasn't inherited wealth. That was 15 years of skipping vacations, driving a car with 200,000 miles on it, eating rice and beans on Fridays, so I could put $200, $300, sometimes $400 a month into a savings account, earmarked for one thing: Lily's college fund. My sister Bridget was the one who helped me set it up. She worked at a credit union for 6 years, knew the best interest rates, knew how to structure everything. When she suggested a joint account so she could help me manage it, move money around when rates changed, handle paperwork when I was busy, I didn't think twice. She was my sister. She was all I had left after our parents died. I handed her the keys to my daughter's future and I thanked her for taking them. For 3 years, everything looked fine. Bridget would text me quarterly updates. "Fun's looking good, sis. Hit 45K this month." I'd feel this warm rush of pride like I was actually pulling it off. Like Lily was going to walk onto the campus at Ohio State without the crushing debt that had buried me for a decade after my own degree. I never logged into the account myself. Why would I? Bridget had it handled. Bridget always had everything handled. Then came Thanksgiving 2023. Lily was upstairs FaceTiming her boyfriend. Bridget was in the kitchen doing dishes. I sat down at the dining table to look up a recipe on Bridget's laptop, which she'd left open. The browser had 2 tabs. One was Pinterest. The other was the credit union's online portal. I almost didn't click it. I almost went straight to Pinterest. But the tab showed a balance preview and the number I saw made my hand freeze over the trackpad. $4,211. I stared at it. I clicked the tab. I read it again. I scrolled down through the transaction history and the kitchen sounds behind me. Water running, Bridget humming some song. They went muffled like someone had stuffed cotton in my ears. Withdrawal after withdrawal after withdrawal. 2,000 here, 1,500 there. Sometimes 3 times a month. All going to the same external account. Over 3 years, $42,000 had been siphoned out of my daughter's college fund. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely scroll. I started clicking on the transfer details. The receiving account was registered to a name I recognized. Derek Molina. Bridget's boyfriend of 2 years. The guy who'd been launching a gourmet taco truck called Fuego Bites, that as far as I could tell, had never actually served a single taco to a paying customer. Every family gathering, Derek talked about his brand and his investor pipeline and his plans to franchise. I'd smiled and nodded. I'd even bought one of his branded t-shirts. $25. To the man who was stealing my daughter's education. I took photos of every screen, every transaction, every transfer detail. My hands were still shaking, but some cold, clear part of my brain had taken over. The part that had kept me alive through a divorce, through burying both parents in the same year, through all of it. I screenshotted everything and sent it to my own email. Then I closed the tab and walked into the kitchen. Bridget turned around, drying a casserole dish, and smiled at me. "You want me to wrap up the leftover pie?" I looked at her face. The same face I'd known for 41 years. The face that had cried next to me at Mom's funeral. The face that had held Lily as a baby when I was too exhausted to stand. And I said, "Sure." Pie sounds great. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed running the math over and over. Lily's acceptance to Ohio State had come in October. We'd celebrated with cake. She'd cried happy tears. Tuition, room, and board books, we'd budgeted it all based on a fund that no longer existed. Freshman year started in August. That was 6 months away. 6 months and I had $4,000 where there should have been $47,000. I called Bridget 3 days later. I didn't ambush her. I didn't scream. I asked her to meet me at a Panera near her apartment because I thought a public place would keep me from doing something I'd regret. She showed up in yoga pants holding an iced coffee looking like it was any other Tuesday. I set my phone on the table between us, screen up showing the account statement. Explain this. The color left her face in stages. First her cheeks, then her lips. Then even her ears went white. She didn't pick up the phone. She didn't need to. She knew exactly what she was looking at. Dana, I was going to put it back. That sentence, I will hear that sentence on my deathbed. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when I'm old and fading, those 6 words will still be rattling around in my skull. I was going to put it back. As if $42,000 is a library book. As if you can just slide it back on the shelf and no one notices it was gone. Derek's truck is about to take off, she said. We have investors coming in January. I swear to God, Dana, I was going to replace every penny before Lily needed it. Lily needs it now, Bridget. She needs it in 6 months. I know. I know. And I'll figure it out. Just give me... You've had 3 years. My voice didn't crack. I wanted it to. I wanted to cry, to scream, to flip the table. But nothing came out except this flat, dead calm that scared me more than anger would have. You've had 3 years and $42,000, and you've given it to a man who sells nothing from a truck that doesn't run. She started crying. Real tears, messy tears, the kind that make people at other tables look over. She told me Derek had promised returns. She told me the truck had equipment problems, permit delays, bad luck. She told me she loved him and she'd made a mistake, and she was sorry. She was so sorry. I sat there and watched my sister cry, and I felt nothing. That was the worst part. Not the money. Not the betrayal. The nothing. The realization that the person sitting across from me was a stranger who happened to share my DNA. Are you going to tell Lily? She whispered. I'm going to do whatever I have to do to get my daughter to college in August. I hired a lawyer the following week. A woman named Carla who specialized in financial fraud and didn't blink when I told her the defendant would be my own sister. She said the case was strong. Joint account, documented unauthorized transfers, clear paper trail to a third party. She said we could pursue civil recovery and potentially criminal charges for theft by deception. Bridget called me 14 times the day she was served. I let every call go to voicemail. Her messages started apologetic and ended threatening. She said I was tearing the family apart. She said Mom and Dad would be ashamed of me. She said that to me. The one who'd spent 15 years saving? The one who'd been stolen from? Derek, for his part, vanished. Closed his social media. Shut down the Fuego Bites website. Bridget told my cousin he'd moved to Kentucky. The food truck, I later learned, had been repossessed by a lender in November, a full month before Thanksgiving. Which means, when Bridget was still texting me those cheerful updates about the fund, she already knew the money was gone and the business it went to was dead. The court date is in March. My lawyer is confident we'll get a judgment. Whether Bridget can actually pay is another question. She has a condo with some equity. She has a retirement account. Carla says we can pursue garnishment. It'll be slow. It'll be ugly. In the meantime, I started a GoFundMe that Lily doesn't know about. I picked up weekend shifts at a catering company. Lily's high school counselor helped us apply for emergency financial aid and last-minute scholarships. We'll cobble it together. We always do. Lily asked me last week why Aunt Bridget wasn't coming to Christmas. I told her we'd had a disagreement. She looked at me with those sharp, knowing eyes, she's 18, not stupid, and said, "Is it about money?" I said, "Yeah, baby, it's about money." She hugged me and said, "We'll be okay, Mom." And I held my daughter in my kitchen in Westerville, Ohio, and I thought about all the rice and beans, all the skipped vacations, all the Friday nights. I said no to myself so I could say yes to her future. I thought about my sister's face at Panera, white as paper, mouth full of promises that were already broken before she made them. Some people will tell you blood is thicker than water. That family forgives. That you should keep the peace at any cost. But those people have never watched someone they love steal from their child and call it borrowing. I'm not keeping the peace. I'm keeping the receipts.
Story 5.
I watched my own words come out of his mouth on a Tuesday morning in March. I was sitting in the back row of Conference Room B on the 7th floor, the one with the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River, and my manager, Greg Hollister, was standing at the front of the room presenting a 62-slide deck to the executive board. Every slide was mine. Every word. Every data point, every strategic pivot, every campaign framework I'd spent 11 weeks building from scratch while eating cold ramen at my desk past midnight. He didn't even change the font. I remember my hands going numb. I remember the sound of the CFO saying, "Greg, this is brilliant work." I remember Greg smiling that practiced humble smile he does and saying, "Well, I can't take all the credit, but I really felt passionate about this direction." He didn't look at me. Not once. My name is Elena Marsh. I'm 31 years old. I've been a data analyst at Kessler & Boone Marketing for 3.5 years. And for most of that time, I thought if I just worked hard enough, kept my head down, and delivered exceptional results, the right people would notice. The right people did notice. They just weren't the people I expected. Let me back up. Greg hired me. That's the part that makes this complicated. He pulled my resume out of a pile of 200 applicants, called me personally, told me he saw something special in my analytical approach. For the first year, I genuinely liked him. He was charming. Mentored me. Bought the team lunch on Fridays. He had this way of making you feel like you were part of something important, like the work mattered, like he saw you. The first time it happened, I almost didn't catch it. I'd written a client retention analysis, nothing flashy, just a deep dive into churn patterns for our biggest account. I sent it to Greg on a Thursday night. The following Monday, I overheard him on a call with the VP of Client Services, walking through my findings as if they'd come from his own brain. He used my exact phrasing. Behavioral decay curve. That was my term. I'd coined it. I told myself it was normal. Managers present their team's work. That's how it works. Right. But then it happened again. And again. A social media pivot strategy I'd developed for a pharmaceutical client. A competitive analysis framework I'd built using a methodology I'd literally invented during my master's thesis. Each time, Greg would ask me to send in my drafts for review. Each time those drafts would reappear in meetings, I wasn't invited to under his name with my fingerprint scrubbed clean. By the second year, I started keeping notes. Not because I had a plan, because I was starting to feel like I was losing my mind. The real escalation came in October when Greg was nominated for the Kessler Award, the firm's annual prize for strategic innovation. The nomination was based on the Meridian campaign. My campaign, the one I'd built from a blank whiteboard over 6 months running regression analyses at 2 a.m, testing audience segments until my eyes bled. I'd even named it Project Meridian, because I'd been staring at a map of meridian lines when the core insight clicked. Greg won the award. He gave a speech. He thanked his incredible team in that vague, sweeping way that means nobody specific. I sat at table 6 and clapped. I smiled. I drank my wine. And when I got home that night, I sat on my bathroom floor and cried so hard I burst a blood vessel in my left eye. That was the night I started the file. I called it Insurance. A folder on an encrypted external drive. Every original draft with timestamps. Every email I'd sent. Greg, with my work attached. Every calendar invite I'd been excluded from where that work was later presented. I started screenshotting everything as Slack messages asking for my rough thoughts, followed by board presentations the next day using those exact rough thoughts polished and credited to him. Then I discovered something that changed everything. I was digging through old shared drives looking for a template when I found a folder labeled Archive Team Transitions. Inside were exit interview notes for 5 former analysts who'd worked under Greg over the past 4 years. All 5 had chosen to resign. All 5 had glowing performance reviews right up until their final quarter, when suddenly their ratings dropped. Phrases kept repeating across their files: lack of initiative, difficulty collaborating, not a culture fit. The same phrases Greg had started using about me in our last one-on-one. I tracked down 2 of them on LinkedIn. The first, a woman named Priya, didn't respond. The second, a guy named Marcus, called me back within an hour. His voice was shaking. "He did the same thing to you, didn't he?" Marcus said. He told me everything. The stolen work, the gaslighting, the way Greg would praise you in private and erase you in public. Marcus said he'd tried to report it, gone to HR, and within 2 weeks, Greg had put him on a performance improvement plan. Marcus resigned a month later. He said it nearly ended his career. That conversation rewired something in me. This wasn't just about my slides. This was a system. Greg had been feeding on junior analysts for years, consuming their work, spitting out their careers, and climbing the ladder on the bones of people too exhausted or too scared to fight back. I needed someone inside the building who had power and no loyalty to Greg. That's when I thought of Diane Okafor, the CEO's chief of staff. I'd met her once at a company town hall, and she'd asked me a sharp, specific question about data attribution that told me she actually understood what analysts do. More importantly, she reported directly to the CEO and operated completely outside Greg's chain of command. I didn't go to her office. I didn't send a dramatic email. I simply started BCCing her on every original draft I sent to Greg. Every single one. No explanation. Just the raw work timestamp from my company emailed days or weeks before Greg would present it as his own. I did this for 4 months. Then Greg made his biggest mistake. In February, he pulled me into his office and closed the door. He told me he'd heard I'd been talking to people outside the department about internal work. His voice was calm, but his eyes were different. Hard. He leaned forward and said, "And I will never forget this, Elena, I've built something here. And people who try to disrupt what I've built tend to find that this industry is smaller than they think." I asked him if that was a threat. He smiled and said, "It's advice." I went back to my desk. My hands were shaking. But this time, it wasn't from fear. I opened my email and forwarded his calendar invite for the meeting, the one that would show the closed-door session with no documented agenda, to Diane. Then I typed 3 words in the body of the email: "I'm ready to talk." Diane called me that evening from her personal phone. She told me she'd been watching. She'd received every BCC. She'd already begun cross-referencing my original drafts against Greg's board presentations. The timestamps weren't even close. My work preceded his presentations by days, sometimes weeks. She'd also quietly pulled the personnel files of the 5 former analysts. She'd spoken to Marcus. She'd spoken to Priya, who had finally responded to Diane's outreach, even though she'd ignored mine. The pattern was undeniable. 3 weeks later, Greg was called into a meeting with the CEO, the general counsel, and the head of HR. He walked in, expecting to discuss his upcoming promotion to senior vice president. He did not get promoted. The investigation took 6 weeks. They found that Greg had systematically claimed credit for the original work of at least 7 employees over a 5-year period. They found deleted email threads he thought were gone. IT recovered them from backup servers. They found Slack messages where he'd explicitly told junior analysts not to present their own work because the executives prefer hearing it from leadership. They found the performance improvement plans he'd weaponized against anyone who pushed back. Greg was terminated. Not quietly. Not with a resignation package and a polite LinkedIn post about new opportunities. He was fired for cause. His Kessler Award was rescinded. The CEO issued an internal memo acknowledging that multiple employees had been harmed by a sustained failure of managerial accountability, and announced a new attribution policy requiring all strategic work to be credited to its original authors. I was offered Greg's position. I turned it down. I didn't want his office. I didn't want his title. I wanted something he never gave anyone. I wanted to be credited for my own work and left alone to do it well. They created a new senior analyst role for me instead. Corner desk. Direct line to the strategy team. My name on my own slides. Marcus came back to the company 4 months later. Priya didn't. She'd built something better somewhere else, but she sent me an email that said simply, "Thank you for being the one who didn't leave quietly." Here's what I learned. Silence isn't professional. Silence is what people like Greg count on. They build entire careers on the assumption that the people doing the real work will be too polite, too scared, or too tired to say anything. And most of the time, they're right. But not every time. Not this time.
Story 6.
I trusted my doctor for 2 years while a tumor grew inside me to the size of a grapefruit. He told me it was anxiety. He told me it was irritable bowel syndrome. He wrote in my chart in permanent ink in a medical record that followed me everywhere that I was drug seeking. And I believed him. I believed him over my own body, over every scream my insides made at 3 in the morning when I was curled on the bathroom floor, sweating through my clothes, biting down on a rolled up washcloth, so I wouldn't wake my daughter. My name is Maya Okonkwo. I'm 36 years old. I live in Philadelphia. And I almost died because a man with a white coat and a reputation decided I wasn't worth listening to. It started when I was 32. The pain came in episodes, sudden, brutal, like someone was wringing out my intestines with both hands. I'd be fine for a week, sometimes 2, and then it would hit without warning. At work, in the car, in the middle of reading my daughter a bedtime story, I'd go white. I'd sweat through my shirt. I couldn't stand up straight. My primary care doctor referred me to Dr. Richard Lassiter at Temple University Hospital. Gastroenterology. Published researcher. Department chair. The kind of doctor whose name other doctors say with a little reverence in their voice. I remember feeling lucky to get the appointment. The first visit, he spent maybe 12 minutes with me. He pressed on my abdomen, asked about my diet, asked about my stress levels. I told him I was a single mom, working full-time as a paralegal. He nodded like I'd just confirmed something for him. He diagnosed me with IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. Told me to cut out gluten and dairy, prescribed a low-dose antispasmodic, and said to come back in 6 weeks. I did everything he said. Everything. I overhauled my diet. I kept a food journal. I downloaded a meditation app because he said stress was probably a major trigger. The pain didn't stop. It got worse. The episodes lasted longer, came closer together. I started losing weight, not a little, a lot. 15 pounds in 3 months. My clothes hung off me. My coworkers noticed. My mom noticed. I noticed. But when I went back to Dr. Lassiter and told him the treatment wasn't working, that the pain was escalating, that I was losing weight. I couldn't afford to lose. He barely looked up from his laptop. He adjusted the antispasmodic dose. He added a low-dose antidepressant. He told me IBS is a chronic condition and that I needed to manage my expectations. I asked about imaging. An MRI, a CT scan, something. He said it wasn't indicated. He said my symptoms were consistent with IBS and that ordering unnecessary scans would just expose me to radiation and run up my insurance. He said it in this patient, almost paternal tone, like he was protecting me from myself. The third visit is the one that haunts me. The pain had gotten so bad that I'd gone to urgent care twice between appointments. I was barely eating because everything triggered an episode. I'd started missing work. I sat across from him, and I said I remember the exact words. Dr. Lassiter, something is really wrong with me. This isn't just IBS. Can we please look deeper? He leaned back in his chair and asked me what I thought was wrong. Not in a curious way, in a testing way. I said I didn't know, that's why I was asking him. He said, Maya, I've been doing this for 23 years. I've seen thousands of patients with your exact presentation. This is a functional disorder. The more you fixate on it, the worse it gets. Then I made my mistake. I asked about pain management. I said the antispasmodic wasn't touching the pain during episodes, and asked if there was something stronger I could take even just to have on hand for the worst nights. His whole demeanor shifted. He got quiet. He said he didn't prescribe opioids for functional disorders. I said I wasn't specifically asking for opioids, I just wanted something that worked. He said I understand in a way that made it clear he didn't believe me. I found out later what he wrote in my chart that day. Under clinical notes, patient is focused on pain medication. Possible drug-seeking behavior. Recommend continued conservative management. Those words drug-seeking became a tattoo I couldn't wash off. Every doctor, every urgent care visit, every ER trip after that, they'd pull up my chart and I could see it in their eyes. The subtle shift. The slight cooling. I went from being a patient to being a problem. I started doubting myself. That's the part that's hardest to talk about. Maybe it was anxiety. Maybe I was making it worse by worrying. Maybe I had a low pain tolerance. Maybe I was being dramatic. My own mother, God love her gently, suggested I try yoga. My best friend sent me an article about the gut-brain connection. Everyone around me had absorbed Dr. Lassiter's diagnosis like it was gospel, and I started absorbing it too. I stopped advocating for myself. I stopped asking questions. I just lived with the pain. I white-knuckled through episodes and told myself this was my life now. I told myself I was the kind of person whose body overreacts to stress, and that I needed to be tougher. I lost 2 years to that lie. On a Tuesday night in February, the pain hit different. It was sharper, deeper, and it didn't let up. By midnight, I couldn't walk. My mom came to stay with my daughter, and I drove myself to the ER at Jefferson Hospital, not Temple, because I couldn't face going back there. I was triaged, given IV fluids, and waited. The attending was busy with a trauma case, so the resident on the night shift, a young woman maybe 28, named Dr. Priya Anand, came to see me. She pressed on my abdomen and I nearly came off the table. She looked at my chart, she saw the IBS diagnosis, she saw the drug-seeking note, and then she did something no one had done in 2 years. She paused. She looked at me and said, "How long have you been losing weight?" I told her. She asked how long the episodes had been escalating. I told her. She asked if anyone had ever ordered a CT scan. I said no. My doctor said it wasn't indicated. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "I'm going to order one. I want to rule some things out." Just like that. No argument, no lecture, no skepticism. She just ordered the scan. I lay in that CT machine at 2 a.m. shivering under a thin blanket, and I remember thinking it would come back clean and prove Dr. Lassiter right and prove me crazy. It didn't come back clean. Dr. Anand came back into my room and she'd been crying. I could tell she'd wiped her face, but her eyes were red. She sat on the edge of my bed, which doctors don't usually do, and she told me they'd found a large mass, on my colon. The size of a grapefruit. She said they needed to do more tests, but it was almost certainly cancer. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just said I knew something was wrong. And she said, "You were right. I'm so sorry." Stage 3, colorectal cancer. If it had been caught 2 years earlier when I first walked into Dr. Lassiter's office, it likely would have been stage 1. Highly treatable. Survival rates above 90%. By the time Dr. Anand found it, it had spread to my lymph nodes. My survival odds had been cut roughly in half. I had surgery 3 weeks later. They removed a section of my colon and 17 lymph nodes. Then came 6 months of chemotherapy that nearly broke me. I lost my hair, my appetite, my ability to work. My daughter, who was 7, learned to bring me a bucket before I even asked. But I survived. I'm still here. And then I got angry. Not the hot explosive kind. The cold kind. The kind that hires a lawyer. We filed a medical malpractice suit against Dr. Lassiter and the hospital. During discovery, my attorney subpoenaed his patient records. We found 11 other cases, 11 where women, most of them black or brown, had presented with serious symptoms and been diagnosed with anxiety, IBS, or functional disorders without adequate workup. 3 of them had eventually been diagnosed with conditions that had progressed because of the delay. 1 woman had died. Her name was Denise Carter. She was 41. She had 2 sons. Her symptoms were nearly identical to mine. He told her it was stress. The hospital settled with me out of court for a number I'm not allowed to disclose. Dr. Lassiter was not fired. He was reassigned to a research role and quietly removed from patient-facing duties. No public statement. No admission of wrongdoing. His name is still on published papers. He still has his medical license. The state medical board reviewed the complaints and issued a formal reprimand. A reprimand for a pattern of negligence that cost 1 woman her life and nearly cost me mine. I tell this story now because I need you to hear something. If your body is telling you something is wrong, it is wrong. If your doctor dismisses you, find another doctor. If they write drug seeking in your chart, demand it be amended. If they won't listen, make them document their refusal in writing. I spent 2 years apologizing for my own pain. 2 years shrinking myself to fit inside a diagnosis that was never mine. I will never do that again. And if Richard Lassiter ever hears this, I want him to know that I remember every single time he looked at his laptop instead of looking at me. I hope he remembers too.
Story 7.
I know what you probably think of me. You've heard his side of the story, so I'm the monster. I'm the cheating, manipulative sociopath who blew up his life. And yeah, I did a terrible thing. I'm not going to pretend I didn't. But you're only seeing the final frame of a 2-year-long movie, and you have no idea how I got there. I moved in with him and his family when I was 18. After a huge fight with my dad, I basically had a garbage bag full of clothes and nowhere to go. My boyfriend, let's call him Alex, said I could stay with him. His mom was amazing at first. She made me feel so welcome, like part of the family. It felt like I was being rescued. But you can only be a guest in someone else's house for so long before you start to feel like a ghost. After a few months, the rescue started to feel like a cage. It was their food I was eating, their water I was using, their roof over my head. Every kind thing they did for me felt like another bar on the window. I wasn't their daughter. I was their son's live-in charity project. I had no privacy, no space that was truly mine, and no say in anything. I was grateful, of course, but I was also suffocating under the weight of that gratitude. And then there was Alex. When we were younger, like 16, and he told me he was the jealous type, I thought it was romantic. It sounded like he cared so much he couldn't stand the thought of anyone else looking at me. By the time I was 20 and living in his house, it wasn't romantic anymore. It was a full-time job managing his insecurities. He'd check my phone when he thought I was asleep. He'd ask who I was texting, why I was smiling at my screen, why I wore a certain outfit to my part-time job. I was constantly being watched, constantly on trial for crimes I hadn't even thought about committing. The night everything really started to break was during a game of Codenames. His sister and her boyfriend, let's call him Mark, were over. It was a normal game night. Mark and I were on a team, and we were actually doing pretty well. We were laughing, high-fiving, just having fun. For the first time in months, I felt like a normal person, not Alex's sad girlfriend who lived in his parents' basement. I felt light. That feeling lasted until we went to bed. The second the door was closed, the interrogation started. You and Mark seemed to be having a lot of fun tonight. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. He asked why I was laughing so hard at his jokes, why I kept looking at him. He made me feel disgusting for just enjoying a board game. My laughter was evidence. My smile was a confession. I tried to defend myself, but it was pointless. In his mind, I had already done something wrong. After that night, a new rule was added to my prison. I had to be careful around Mark. So I was. I became terrified to even make eye contact with the guy. If he was in the kitchen, I'd wait until he left. If he was talking to me, I'd give one-word answers and walk away. I thought that would make Alex happy, that it would prove my loyalty. I was wrong. A week later, Alex cornered me again. "Why are you being so awkward around Mark? It's making everyone uncomfortable." It looks suspicious. Do you see, there was no way to win. If I was friendly, I was a flirt. If I was distant, I was hiding something. I was trapped. I wasn't a person to him anymore. I was a problem he had to manage, a possession he had to guard, all while I was living under his family's roof, eating their food and following his rules. Mark was the only person in that entire house who didn't look at me with either pity or suspicion. He just saw me. He'd ask how my day was and actually listen to the answer. He never made me feel like I owed him anything. We never talked about it, but I think he felt a little trapped too, always having to be the perfect boyfriend for Alex's sister. There was this unspoken understanding between us. A shared feeling of being outsiders in a family that wasn't ours. The tension just kept building. Then came the day in the kitchen. I was getting a glass of water and Mark was walking through to the back door. We were alone for maybe 10 seconds. He said something stupid, I don't even remember what, and as he walked past me, he gave me a quick light slap on the ass. It wasn't aggressive or sexual. It was a dumb, impulsive, cross-the-line joke between two people who were going a little crazy from the pressure. It was a mistake, a huge one, but it wasn't malicious. I didn't even have time to process it before Alex was standing in the doorway. He hadn't even been in the room. He'd seen it. He told me he saw the whole thing in the reflection of the glass on the back door. A times reflection asterisk. He wasn't just walking by. He was watching me, spying on me through a reflection, like some kind of creep. His voice was this low, angry hiss. He wasn't just hurt. He was furious that his property had been touched. That's when I snapped. The argument was huge. He was yelling about betrayal, and I was screaming about being watched every second of every day. I told him I couldn't live like this anymore, that I was leaving. For a second, I really meant it. I saw my chance to finally get out. But as the words left my mouth, the reality hit me. Where would I go? I had no money saved up, and my relationship with my dad was still a mess. I had nowhere. My threat was completely empty, and we both knew it. His anger disappeared in an instant, replaced by panic. He started apologizing, begging me not to go. He swore he'd changed, that he was just scared of losing me. It wasn't a real apology. It was the sound of a warden convincing a prisoner that her cell was actually for her own good. And like a coward, I let him convince me. I agreed to stay. But in my head, I was already gone. I just hadn't figured out how to unlock the door yet. The house felt colder after that. We were sleeping in the same bed, but might as well have been on different planets. A few nights later, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing, replaying every mistake, every argument. The walls felt like they were closing in. Around 3 a.m., I gave up and went to the kitchen for some water, just needing to get out of that room. And he was there. Mark. Sitting on the couch in the dark, staring at his phone. He couldn't sleep either. We talked for a few minutes, just quiet, tired whispers. It was nothing really. But it was the first real human conversation I'd had in weeks. And in a moment of total absolute desperation, I did something incredibly stupid. I went over to him and I sat on his lap, burying my face in his shoulder. It wasn't about him. It was about needing to feel safe for 5 seconds, and he was the only person who felt less like a guard and more like a fellow prisoner. It was a foolish, reckless search for a little bit of comfort in a house that had none left for me. After a minute, I got up, mumbled goodnight, and went back to my room, back to the cold side of the bed next to Alex. I closed my eyes, a sick feeling of dread and relief washing over me, and finally fell into a restless sleep. The next morning felt like a hangover, even though I hadn't had a drop to drink. My sleep had been deep but not restful, the kind where you wake up feeling like you've been running a marathon. For a few seconds, everything was normal. The light was filtering through the blinds, Alex was breathing softly beside me, and the world was quiet. Then the memory of the night before crashed down on me. The kitchen. Mark. My stomach twisted into a knot. I was trying to slip out of bed without waking Alex when his voice, cold and flat, cut through the silence. "Don't bother." My heart stopped. I turned over slowly. He wasn't looking at me. He was sitting up, his back against the headboard, and his laptop was open on his lap. He swiveled it to face me. "What is this?" he asked. His voice had no emotion in it at all, which was somehow scarier than if he'd been screaming. On the screen was a grainy black and white video. It was a view of the living room and kitchen from an odd angle up near the ceiling. I saw myself walk into the frame. I saw Mark on the couch. I saw us talking. And then I watched myself, like an out-of-body experience, cross the room and sit on his lap. The timestamp in the corner read 3:15 a.m. It took me a second to process what I was seeing. Not the act itself, but the fact that I was seeing it at all. You filmed me," I whispered. The betrayal of what I'd done was instantly swallowed by the ice-cold shock of how he'd found out. A camera, a hidden camera. In the home I lived in, my paranoia wasn't in my head. He really was times watching me. He finally looked at me and his eyes were completely dead. The blueprint was right. There was no heartbreak there. No sadness. There was just victory. The smug satisfaction of a detective who'd finally cracked the case. He had his evidence. He had proof that all his suspicion, all his jealousy, all his control had been justified all along. He was right about me. I had a feeling, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. After the kitchen thing, I knew I couldn't trust you. The argument that followed wasn't really an argument. It was a firing squad, and I was tied to the post. He called me every name you can imagine. A liar, a whore, a snake. But the one that stuck, the one he kept repeating, was sociopath. He said I had no feelings, that I had manipulated him and his family, that I was incapable of love. He stood over me, the laptop screen still glowing like he was a prosecutor presenting his final damning piece of evidence to a jury. And I just sat there. I didn't cry. I didn't scream back. All I could feel was this strange hollow buzzing in my ears. The game was over. I had lost spectacularly, but the crushing weight of having to play it every single day was suddenly gone. He hadn't wanted to fix us after the slap in the kitchen. He'd wanted to times me. All his begging and apologizing had been a lie to keep me in the house in his trap until I made a mistake he could record. "Get your stuff," he said finally, his voice shaking with a rage he could barely contain. "I want you out of my house, now." A strange sense of calm washed over me. I stood up and pulled out the garbage bags I'd first moved in with 2 years ago. As I started mechanically pulling my clothes out of the dresser, the words just started spilling out of me. It wasn't for him. He was already scrolling through his phone, probably planning how he would tell his family how he would be the perfect victim. The apology was for me. It was a long, rambling confession to the empty room. I apologized for being too weak to just leave. I apologized for letting myself get so lost that I thought hurting him was the only way to escape. I apologized for using Mark's small kindness as a weapon and a crutch. I apologized for wasting 2 years of my life and his living a lie because I was too scared to be on my own. I was talking to myself, trying to make sense of the absolute mess I had become. He just grunted. "Save it. I don't want to hear your psychobabble." He was right. It didn't matter. I had packed my whole life into 3 black trash bags. I stood there looking at the room that had been my prison cell, and the final humiliation hit me. I had nowhere to go. There was only one option, one phone call I had been dreading for 2 years. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely dial the number. He answered on the second ring. "Dad." My voice cracked. I hadn't called him Dad in 2 years. There was a pause. "Stacy." And then I broke. The sobs I'd been holding back all morning came out in a huge, ugly wave. I couldn't even form sentences. I just cried and choked out words like, "Made a mistake, need help, and can I come home?" He didn't ask questions. He didn't say, "I told you so." He just said, "I'm on my way. Send me the address." An hour later, my dad's truck pulled up. Seeing him walk to the door was the most shameful and relieving moment of my life. Alex met him at the door, and I could hear their muffled, tense conversation. I imagine Alex showed him the video. I imagine he told him what a sociopath his daughter was. I don't care. My dad just walked into the room, looked at me, looked at my trash bags, and said, "Let's go." The car ride was silent. We drove for 20 minutes before he finally spoke. "You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to," he said, not looking at me. "But your room is still your room. It's a mess, but it's there." And I cried again. Not because I was sad about Alex, but because for the first time in 2 years, someone had offered me something with no strings attached. A room. Just a room. My own space. I know what Alex tells people. He has the video. He has the perfect story of betrayal. He'll always be the good guy, and I'll always be the monster who broke his heart. And maybe I am a monster. But he's not the hero he thinks he is. A hero doesn't set traps. A hero doesn't need surveillance footage to feel secure. He thinks he uncovered some dark, twisted plot, but he didn't. All he did was film a girl who was too scared and too weak to walk out the front door. A girl who chose to light a match and burn her own life down because it was the only way she could finally see a way out. I'm not proud of it. But I'm out. And for the first time in a long time, I don't have to worry about who's watching.
Story 8.
Okay, I need to get this out. I need someone to hear my side of the story because right now, everyone I know is looking at me like I'm some kind of monster. My husband left me. And yes, I know what I did. But nobody seems to want to understand times why, asterisk. Our life before all this was fine. That's the most honest word for it. It was fine. My husband is a good man, a kind man. He told me he loved me every day, and I know he meant it. We'd only been married a year, but it felt like we'd fast-forwarded through all the exciting parts and landed straight in the comfortable, quiet part that's supposed to come decades later. Our house was beautiful. Our routine was perfect. Everything was beige. It was a nice, safe, beautiful beige, but it was still beige. He'd tell me, "You're more than enough for me," and it was supposed to be a compliment. But to me it felt like a sentence. It meant we were done. Done exploring, done being curious, done discovering new things about each other. He was satisfied. But I wasn't. I wasn't enough for myself. I felt this whole other person trapped inside me, the girl I was before I became a wife. And she was screaming to be let out. And I thought he felt it too on some level. We'd played around with fantasies before. Little role plays, jokes about cuckolding, about me being desired by other men while he watched. It was hot, and it felt like our little secret, our own weird language. I thought that was his way of saying he understood there was a world outside our beige room. I thought it was a sign that he also wanted something more, but was just too afraid to say it out loud. Then I met someone at work. Let me be clear, he wasn't a great guy. His personality was kind of abrasive, almost not even there. He wasn't someone I'd ever want to build a life with. But he looked at me. He looked at me in a way my husband hadn't in so long. He didn't see a wife, or a partner, or a teammate. He just saw a woman. And he wanted her. The sexting started small. It was an escape. A little secret world on my phone where I could be this other person, this desired, wanted sexual person without any consequences. It felt like a lifeline. I started to feel like myself again, like I was waking up. But a fantasy isn't enough when you're starving. I wanted to feel that way in my real life. And I honestly, truly believed that I could bring my husband into this new world with me. I thought this could be something that would wake us both up. I tried to ease into it. One night I asked him just casually if he'd ever take a free pass if I gave him one. His no was so fast, so final. It was almost disgusted. It felt like a slap. It was him telling me loud and clear that he was perfectly happy in his beige room and had no intention of leaving. So I knew I had to be direct. I told him about my coworker. I told him everything. Yes, I had already been sending him pictures. I wasn't proud that I'd lied about it, but how do you explain this kind of hunger to someone who keeps telling you how full he is? I tried to make it fair. I told him he could have a free pass too, no questions asked. I even said I'd help him find someone if he wanted. This wasn't about me cheating. This was about us opening a door together. He didn't see it that way. He saw it as a problem to be solved. He called my offer immature and petty. It hurt so much. He started talking about all the women he'd been with before me, trying to act like he was so worldly and I was just a naive kid. He was twisting his lack of interest into some kind of moral high ground, like his boredom was a sign of loyalty. But in the end, he agreed. He said I could one time. He was so reluctant. And he had his condition if he was uncomfortable after it had to stop completely. I agreed just to get him to say yes. That night with my colleague, it was everything I needed it to be. It was purely physical. There were no feelings, no complications, just raw energy. It was like a storm, and for the first time in years, I felt powerful. I felt free. This was never about replacing my husband. It was about finding a missing part of myself, finding some color and passion in my own life so I could finally bring it back to ours. I came home buzzing. I felt alive. I felt changed. I wanted to share that energy with him. But the first thing he wanted to talk about was boundaries. He wanted to set rules. He wanted to know when I'd see him, where I'd see him, what we would do. It was so insulting. He had just let me out of a cage for one night and he was already trying to build a new, slightly bigger one around me. He was trying to manage my experience instead of being excited for me, for us. Then he asked if he could watch next time. It felt so clinical. The way he said it, it wasn't like he wanted to be part of it. It was like he wanted to be a scientist observing an experiment. My colleague wasn't comfortable with it. And to be honest, neither was I. It wasn't the shared fantasy I thought it would be. The next weekend, I decided I wasn't going to ask for permission. This was my journey, my self-discovery. I went to see my colleague again. I just wanted to feel that freedom one more time without a deadline or a list of rules attached. I ended up staying the night. His friend came over. Things just happened. It was a whirlwind and I was in the middle of it, making choices for myself, not for my marriage or my husband, but for me. I came home the next day feeling exhausted but also renewed. I wanted to try and explain it to him, to tell him about this wild, messy new part of myself. But the look on his face when I walked in was just pure hurt. All he could see was that I had broken his rules. I just snapped. I was so tired of his judgment. Get over it, I told him. I know it sounds harsh, but I was trying to shock him out of his sadness. This moping isn't manly, I said. I wanted him to get angry, to fight, to show some kind of passion. I wanted him to see the woman in front of him and react. But he didn't. He just went quiet. He walked into our bedroom, and when he came back out, he was carrying a duffel bag. I just stared at him, completely confused. I thought this was our arrangement. A messy, complicated one, but something we were figuring out. He zipped up the bag and walked to the front door. He didn't even yell. He just looked at me with this empty expression and said, "I can't do this." And then he left. He just walked out and closed the door behind him. I stood there for I don't know how long, just listening to his car drive away, trying to understand what just happened. I thought he was just cooling off. I had no idea what he was about to do. The silence in the house after he left was deafening. It was worse than our usual quiet. This was an empty quiet, a final quiet. For a few minutes I was just angry. How dare he be so dramatic, walking out with a bag like he's in some bad movie? I sent him a text. "Seriously, you're just leaving. A little dramatic, don't you think?" No reply. Then I sent another. "Fine, cool off. Call me when you're ready to talk like an adult." Still nothing. I spent that evening pacing the house, my anger slowly turning into a sick feeling in my stomach. This was supposed to be a jolt to our system, not the end of it. I thought he was at his brother's place, sulking. I thought he'd be back by morning, ready to either yell or finally have the real conversation we needed to have. I never in a million years expected what he did next. My phone rang the next afternoon. It was my mom. I answered, expecting her usual cheerful, "Hi, honey." Instead, her voice was tight and strange. "I just got off the phone with your husband," she said. My blood went cold. "And your father spoke with his parents?" I couldn't breathe. "He didn't. He wouldn't." "What are you talking about?" I asked, but I already knew. "He told us everything," she said, and I could hear the disappointment cracking in her voice. "About your co-worker. And some friend of his, a threesome. Honey, what were you thinking?" It was the ultimate betrayal. Worse than him leaving. He took our private, messy, complicated problem and aired it out like dirty laundry for our parents to see. He knew how much I valued their opinion. He knew this would destroy me. He didn't come to me, his wife, to try and work through it. He ran straight to Mommy and Daddy, mine and his, and painted me as a monster to get them on his side. He turned the two people I needed most against me before I even had a chance to explain. I hung up on my mom. I couldn't listen to her shame. I called him, my hands shaking with rage. He answered on the second ring, his voice completely flat. "What?" "You went to my parents," I screamed into the phone. "You went to my parents before you even had the decency to finish a conversation with me, you coward." "There's nothing left to talk about," he said, and he sounded like a stranger. "I'm at my brother's. I'm coming by tomorrow to get the rest of my things. I'd appreciate it if you weren't there." "You don't get to do that," I was sobbing now, a mix of anger and sheer panic. "You don't get to blow up our lives and then just walk away. We had an arrangement. You agreed." "I agreed to one night." "I agreed to try and understand," he said, his voice hard as stone. "You lied. You went behind my back and you did that." with 2 men. You didn't even tell me. That wasn't our arrangement. That was just you doing whatever you wanted. He was right, technically. But he was missing the whole point. I needed to feel free. I needed to not ask for permission. Don't you get it? This was about me finding myself. Well, you found yourself, he said, and there was a pause. And I found out who I'm married to. I'm filing for divorce. My dad is giving me the number for a lawyer. The word divorce sucked all the air out of the room. A lawyer. It was real. This wasn't a fight anymore. It was an ending. He had already made up his mind. He wasn't my partner anymore. He was my opponent. The conversation ended. I don't even remember who hung up. I just sank to the floor, surrounded by our perfect beige furniture, and felt the whole world crash down on me. Over the next few days, I sent him walls of text. Long, tearful messages trying to explain my side one last time. I told him how trapped I felt, how I was suffocating and just needed to breathe. I told him I never wanted to lose him. I just wanted to add more to us. I was mourning. I was mourning the loss of my husband, yes, but I was also mourning the loss of the future I really thought we could have. A future that was vibrant and exciting and full of color. A future where we were both free to be our whole selves, not just the safe married parts. He rarely responded. When he did, it was short, practical. I'll be there at 2 p.m. for the desk. Did you cancel the internet? It was like talking to a robot. The man I loved was gone, replaced by this cold, efficient person who was dismantling our life piece by piece. He was never going to get it. He couldn't handle the woman I was becoming. He wanted the old me back, the predictable girl who was content in her beautiful beige room. The problem is, she doesn't exist anymore. I broke her when I started looking for a way out. I know what everyone thinks. They see a cheater, a selfish wife who threw away a good marriage. And maybe they're right. But I see someone who was drowning and did the only thing she could think of to get to the surface. I lost my husband, my home, and the respect of my family. It's a heavy price. But in the silence of this empty house, for the first time in a long time, I can finally breathe. I just wish more than anything that he had wanted to breathe this new air with me.
Story 9.
I know what you think of me. You've probably read his side of the story. I'm the cheater, the liar, the monster who destroyed a good man. And you're not wrong, not really. But you're not right either. The truth is, my husband is the best man I've ever known. When he met me, I was barely holding it together. I was a single mom in my early 20s, working a dead-end job and just trying to make sure my son had food on the table. I was a wreck shaped by a childhood that left scars no one could see. Then came my husband. He didn't just tolerate my baggage. He helped me unpack it. He loved my son as his own from day one. He gave us stability, a home, a future, a normal life. I love him so much for that, more than I can ever explain. He saved me. But sometimes, when you've only ever known chaos, safety can start to feel like a perfectly decorated cage. We both had ugly childhoods, but we dealt with them in opposite ways. He went to therapy and learned about healthy boundaries, communication, and processing his feelings in a calm way. I learned that there are monsters in the world, and the only way to not be afraid of them is to become one yourself. Only one other person on this planet understands my monster, my cousin Max. What happened between us when we were kids? It wasn't what my husband would think. It wasn't an assault. It was the first time I met someone else who had a darkness inside them that matched mine. We saw it in each other. Over the years, that secret understanding turned into something else. A game. Our hookups before I met my husband were never about love. It was never romantic. It was about power. With Max, I wasn't the scared little girl anymore. I was in charge. I was the dominant one. I could take all the fear and shame from my past and turn it into control. Our dynamic was a script we both knew by heart. I'd say no, and he'd know it was part of the scene. I'd insult him, and he would thank me for it. It was our private world, and it was the only place I ever felt completely whole. When I fell in love with my husband, I promised myself I would leave that world behind. I packed it away. I really truly tried. I didn't mean to see Max again. It was just a stupid coincidence. There were a couple of family funerals, and my husband needed the car for work, so Max offered me a ride. Sitting in his car, that old energy was just there, buzzing between us. It was like a drug I hadn't had in years. I had missed it more than I realized. The Facebook messages started after that. At first, it was just catching up. But it didn't take long for us to fall back into our old script. So when he wrote, "I'd like to see you on your knees," it wasn't a threat. It wasn't harassment. It was a line from our play. And my replies, things like, "No, I'm married," weren't me telling him to stop. They were my lines. It was part of the power exchange, the denial he craved, the push and pull that defined our entire relationship. For the first time in years, I felt that flicker of my other self again. The powerful one. But the guilt was crushing me. I started acting like a robot at home. I felt disconnected from the perfect life my husband had given me. I even picked a massive fight with him over some random woman who commented on his Facebook profile. It was pathetic me trying to make him the bad guy, so I didn't have to be. I thought I could do it. I thought I could keep my two lives separate. I could be the loving, normal wife for him and the monster for Max. Then one night he sat down next to me on the couch. He didn't say anything, just handed me his phone. And there they were, our messages. My two worlds didn't just touch. They slammed into each other and exploded. The panic that hit me was so intense I couldn't breathe. The tears, the hysteria, that was all real. But the reason was a lie. I wasn't crying because I was a victim of harassment. I was crying because he had found the door to a room he was never supposed to enter, a room full of things he could never ever understand. My only move was to play the part he would believe. The helpless, harassed wife. "He just won't stop," I sobbed into his chest. I didn't know what to do. I was hoping, praying he would just hold me and tell me it was okay. I kept saying I would handle it, that I'd block him. I just needed to talk to Max one last time to tell him the game was over, that we'd been caught. I needed to close that world down myself. But my husband is a protector. He saw his wife in tears, and all he felt was this righteous, white-hot anger. Before I could stop him, he took his phone back and started typing. "Stop contacting my wife immediately." He hit send. He thought he was saving me. He had no idea he was destroying me. He didn't end a threat. He broke our game. He ripped up our script and set it on fire. The silence from Max was immediate and absolute. He blocked me on everything. The one person who knew the other half of me was just gone. Walled off from me by the very man who only knew my good half. That's why I couldn't stop crying for the next few days. I wasn't mourning the loss of a lover. I was mourning the loss of my pressure valve. I was mourning the only person I could be my whole broken self with. My husband couldn't understand it. He'd come in and find me crying on the bed, and he'd look so confused. "Honey, he's gone. He can't bother you anymore. Why are you still so upset?" One night, he asked me again, and I just looked at him. I couldn't form the words. In that moment, he saw it. The look in my eyes. The one that said this wasn't relief. This was grief. He saw that my story didn't make sense, and for the first time I could see the trust in his eyes flicker and die. He was finally starting to understand that I wasn't a victim. He just didn't know what I was yet. A few days passed, but it felt like a year. The air in our house grew thick and heavy, like we were living at the bottom of the ocean. He stopped touching me. He'd still kiss our son goodnight. He'd still ask me if I needed anything from the store, but he was a polite stranger living in my house. He looked at me, but he didn't see me anymore. He was looking for something else, the thing that would make my story make sense. I knew he was digging. I just didn't know where he'd find it. He found it on a Tuesday night. I was washing dishes and he walked into the kitchen. He didn't say a word, just stood there behind me until I turned around, my hands still dripping with soap. He was holding his phone, the screen lit up. His face was white, completely drained of blood. He looked like he'd just seen a ghost. "What is this?" he asked. His voice was quiet. So quiet it scared me more than if he'd been screaming. He held the phone out. It was an email. An old one from a year ago before we were married. I didn't even have to look closely. I knew. I knew the picture of the black strap-on I'd sent Max. I knew the photos he'd sent back. I knew the words we'd written, the filthy, detailed script of our game. My blood turned to ice. My two worlds hadn't just exploded. Now he was sifting through the radioactive rubble. The lies I had built were all gone. There was nothing left to hide behind. I can explain, I stammered the words, feeling like sand in my mouth. "Explain what?" He whispered his eyes, searching my face for someone he recognized. "Explain the pictures. Or explain the part where you tell him what you want him to do to you. Is this part of the harassment too?" This was it. The final stand. I had to try. I had to make him understand a language he'd never heard. It wasn't an affair. I started, my voice shaking. It wasn't about love. It was a game. A psychodrama. It was about my childhood, about control. I told him everything. About how Max and I understood each other's darkness. About how our dynamic was my way of taking back power from my past. I told him how being dominant with Max was the only way I knew how to not feel like a victim. The words tumbled out of me, a desperate, pathetic confession. I tried to explain that the ugliness he was seeing, the insults, the degradation was our script. It was the only place I felt safe enough to be my most damaged self. He just stared at me. The whole time he didn't move, didn't blink. He just listened. When I finally ran out of words, silence filled the room again, even heavier than before. Again he finally said the words barely audible. He shook his head slowly, a single bitter laugh escaping his lips. He's covered in... And you're wearing a... And you call that a times game? Times. He looked at the phone again, then back at me. The look in his eyes wasn't anger. It was disgust. It was a deep, profound revulsion, as if he was seeing a monster wearing his wife's skin. You don't understand, I pleaded. No, he said, his voice flat and dead. I don't. I understand a good man. I understand a family. I understand loving your son and making a safe home for him. That's what I understand. This, he gestured with his phone, this is filth. It's a betrayal. You didn't just lie to me about Max harassing you. You've been lying to me about who you are for 6 years. He was right. I had shown him the curated, acceptable half of me. The half that was a loving mother and a stable wife. The half I thought he deserved. I had hidden the other part, the broken part, because I knew he would see it exactly as he was seeing it now, as something ugly and unforgivable. He didn't yell. He didn't throw things. He just set his phone down on the counter, turned around, and walked out of the kitchen. A few minutes later, I heard him in the bedroom opening drawers. I knew what was happening. I didn't move. I just stood there, staring at the soap suds in the sink, listening to the quiet, methodical sounds of my life ending. He came back into the living room with a duffel bag. He didn't look at me. He walked over to our son's room and quietly pushed the door open. I heard him whisper something and the soft sound of a kiss on his forehead. When he came back out, he finally looked at me one last time. I need to go, he said. I can't be here. I can't look at you right now. And that was it. He walked out the door and closed it gently behind him. That was a week ago. He's staying at a friend's house. We've only talked through text mostly about our son. He's going to come by to see him this weekend when I'm not here. He says he needs space to think, but I know what that means. You don't come back from this. You can't unsee those pictures. You can't unhear that the person you love has a secret life where they pretend to be a monster. I know, I'm the villain here. I lied. I cheated even if it wasn't an affair in my head. I took the beautiful, safe life he built for us and I smashed it to pieces because I couldn't let go of my broken parts. He saved me from the chaos and I thanked him by dragging him right into the middle of mine. I'm alone now. Truly alone. The man who was my safety is gone. The man who was my release is gone. All I have left is me. Both halves of me finally in the same room with no walls between them. And the silence is deafening. He will never understand that Max was my therapy and he was my cure. I guess I was just too sick to believe the cure was enough. I thought I needed both. And now I have nothing.
Story Teen.
I'm Maddie. And if you've been on the internet long enough, you might have read a story about me. I'm the crazy ex-girlfriend from college, the one who slapped him, cheated on him, and then got my lawyer daddy to threaten him with a restraining order. That's the story he tells anyway. He paints himself as this poor, heartbroken guy who just wanted to love me. I'm sure he got a lot of sympathy. But you only heard his side. You never heard what it was like to be the girl he was trying to save. When I met him, I was a total mess. I'm not going to lie about that. I had just gotten out of a really awful engagement with a guy who cheated on me, and my self-esteem was completely shot. He lived in my apartment complex and just seemed so kind. He was always there, offering to help with groceries, asking how I was doing. He was a nice guy. I thought he was safe. I've learned since then that you have to be careful with nice guys. Sometimes their kindness comes with a price tag, and you don't realize you're paying for it until you're completely broke. Our friendship got intense fast. He wanted to be my everything. My best friend, my shoulder to cry on, my personal driver, my therapist. He told me he was an empath and that he could literally feel my depression. Looking back, it didn't feel like empathy. It felt like he was siphoning off my pain and wearing it like a costume to show everyone how deep and caring he was. He didn't love me. He loved the project of me. He loved having this broken girl he could fix, and it made him feel important. It was only a few months before he started pushing for a label. He wanted me to be his girlfriend. I kept telling him I wasn't ready. The last guy had destroyed my ability to trust, and honestly his intensity was starting to scare me. We were already exclusive, we spent all our time together. But he needed that title. To him, my hesitation wasn't about my own trauma. It was a red flag about times me asterisk. He couldn't see that the constant pressure, the need to define us, was the real problem. It felt less like he was asking for my commitment and more like he was trying to put his brand on me before I was fully healed, locking me in before I realized the room had no air. For over a year, this was our dance. Him pushing me, pulling away, him acting hurt me, feeling guilty. The dynamic was impossible. He set up these psychological traps that I could never escape. If we had an argument and I got overwhelmed and needed to walk away, he'd chase me down the street, literally cornering me on a sidewalk, begging me to talk. So I'd break down and talk, feeling suffocated. The next time, remembering how that felt, I'd walk away, and he wouldn't follow. But then later, he'd use it against me. You see, I gave you space like you wanted, and you still think I don't care. It was a test. I was designed to fail every single time. His friends would tell him he deserved better, that he could do so much better than me. I'm sure he told them all about how unstable I was. I bet he left out the part where his smothering, relentless attention was the very thing making it impossible for me to breathe. So yes, I slapped him, twice. He loves to tell that part of the story. It makes me sound violent and unhinged. He never tells you what led up to it. He doesn't describe the hours-long circular arguments, him twisting my words, backing me into a verbal corner where nothing I said was right. It was like being mentally pummeled. Both times it wasn't some cold, calculated act of violence. It was a desperate, panicked reaction. A clumsy, stupid, and absolutely wrong times attempt to make the noise and the pressure just time stop, asterisk. It was the snap of something stretched too thin for too long. I was so ashamed. When he looked at me shocked, I told him it was a joke. How do you explain to someone that their words, their emotional pressure, made you feel so cornered that your body reacted without your permission? You can't. So you call it a joke and you hate yourself for it. But that wasn't the breaking point. That wasn't what made me realize I was in danger. The real breaking point came during one of our many on-again, off-again phases. We were fighting I'd ended it, and he was falling apart. He was begging me to take him back, telling me he couldn't live without me. Then he told me he had hurt himself. To show me how much pain I was causing him, he cut himself. He actually told me with this twisted look of pride and pain on his face that he got the idea from me from stories I had told him about my own past struggles. He took the most vulnerable, painful parts of my history and turned them into a weapon to use against me. In that single moment, he stopped being the wounded nice guy. He became the most terrifying person I had ever known. All the suffocation and the manipulation clicked into place. This wasn't just an unhealthy relationship anymore. This was a hostage situation. How are you supposed to leave a man who will literally bleed to make you stay? You can't just walk away. He had made it clear he would do anything to keep me. So I did the only thing I could think of. I went back. I pretended everything was okay. And I started planning my escape. That November, I met someone else. He's my husband now. In my ex's story, this is where I become the evil, cheating villain. But it wasn't some torrid affair. It was a lifeline. My husband was everything my ex wasn't. He was calm, he was stable. When I talked, he listened without trying to turn my problems into a showcase for his own deep feelings. He gave me space when I was overwhelmed and comfort when I actually asked for it. He never once pushed me for a title or a timeline. With my husband, I felt like a person again. With my ex, I felt like a hostage whose parole was constantly being denied. I know I should have ended it cleanly before I got to know someone new. I know that. But I was so scared. After the self-harm incident, I was convinced he was dangerously unstable. What would he do if I just cut him off? I couldn't risk it. So I tried to detach slowly. I told him we should go back to casually dating, that the pressure was too much. It was a cowardly move, I'll admit that, but it felt like the only way to back out of the room without setting off an explosion. Of course, he didn't respect it. To him, casually dating was just another test of his loyalty, another chance for him to prove how devoted he was. He'd still pressure me into being physical, and I'd give in sometimes just because I was exhausted from fighting. Afterwards, I would feel disgusting and lash out, asking him why he couldn't just respect the one boundary I'd asked for. He'd turn it around, acting wounded, making me the bad guy for his own inability to take no for an answer. It was a complete nightmare, and it had to end. Finally, I got the courage. I asked him to come over to my parents' house so I wouldn't be alone when I did it. I couldn't even let him inside. I knew he'd make a scene, and I couldn't put my family through that. So I broke up with him in his car right there in the driveway. I was harsh. I had to be. Over the last 2 years, I'd learned that I need space, and I'm not ready, or just invitations for him to try harder. The only thing that might work was to destroy his fantasy of us for good. I told him I never saw a future with him, that we were fundamentally incompatible. I think I said something awful about our different backgrounds, something I knew would hit a nerve. I needed to burn the bridge so he wouldn't try to follow me across it again. His reaction proved I was right to be scared. He wouldn't let go. He'd text and call. He tried to use an accidental butt dial from me as an excuse to pry his way back into my life. Then weird things started happening. I got random friend requests on Facebook from blank profiles. Friends of mine mentioned that he was asking about me. It felt like I was being watched, monitored. I couldn't breathe. I finally broke down and told my dad everything. The constant pressure, the emotional manipulation, the chasing me down the street, the self-harm, and now the feeling that I was being stalked online. My dad is a lawyer, but he's an ex-Marine first. He's fiercely protective. He didn't see a heartbroken ex-boyfriend. He saw a grown man who was emotionally terrorizing his daughter and refused to accept that it was over. So he did what he thought was right. He sent that email. Was a legal threat threatening a restraining order an overreaction? Maybe. But from where I was standing, trapped and terrified, it was the only thing that finally made him go away. It made the noise stop. 3 months later, my now husband proposed. To my ex, I'm sure this was the ultimate proof that I was a heartless cheater all along. He couldn't understand it. But it was fast because it was right. It was easy because it was healthy. There were no mind games, no tests, no emotional debt to be paid. There was just peace. Years passed. We got married, started our family. And then, at a mutual friend's wedding, I saw him. He was across the reception hall. For a split second, our eyes met, and my blood ran cold. It wasn't guilt or shame that I felt, it was pure, primal fear. Seeing his face brought it all rushing back, the anxiety, the suffocating feeling of being trapped, the image of him hurting himself and blaming me for it. My heart was pounding. I grabbed my husband's hand so tightly my knuckles turned white, and I practically dragged him out of the room. I spent the rest of the night avoiding him, hiding on the other side of the venue. I wasn't hiding because I was ashamed of what I did. I was hiding because I was terrified of what he times might do. I didn't want a confrontation. I didn't want him to corner me by the bar and start one of his circular arguments. I didn't want his drama poisoning the one part of my life that was finally happy and stable. He can write his story online and call me a liar and a cheater. He can frame himself as the poor victim who got the last laugh. He wrote that he won because he finished his university program and travels the world while I'm just at home changing diapers. He thinks that's a burn. He has no idea. He thinks winning is about a degree or a job title. But he's wrong. Winning was getting away from him. Winning is being married to a man who doesn't treat my past trauma as a project to be fixed. Winning is a quiet house, a loving partner, and a happy family. He thinks I'm a housewife. He's right. And I've never ever been happier to be free.
Story 11.
I'm sure my husband has told his side of the story, and I'm sure it makes me sound like a monster. The cheating wife. The one who destroyed everything. And I did. I won't deny that. But stories have more than one side, and mine didn't start with a secret text message. It started with silence. Moving back to my hometown was supposed to be a good thing. We'd be closer to family, have more support. But for me, it was the beginning of the end. My husband is a doctor, and he's a brilliant one. He's a good man, a good provider. But he was never really home even when he was sitting right next to me. He'd walk through the door and the stress of his job would walk in with him. It was a physical presence in our house, this cloud of anxiety about work and money that he never ever talked about. He'd just disappear into his phone or his laptop and I would just not exist. My entire life had shrunk. I was the one running the house, raising our kids, managing the schedules, everything. My world was school runs and grocery shopping and a home that felt more like a quiet office where I was the unpaid staff. I loved my children more than anything, but I was disappearing. I was just mom. I was just the doctor's wife. I wasn't a person anymore. I was a set of responsibilities. The loneliness was a physical ache. I started going to therapy by myself. I threw myself into working out. I was trying anything to feel like I was still in my own body. One night, I finally got up the courage to say something. I found him in the living room scrolling on his phone, and my heart was pounding. I asked him if he would go to couples counseling with me. I told him I felt like we were drifting apart. He didn't even really look at me. He just kind of shrugged and said, "I think we're okay. Let's just see how it goes." Okay. He thought we were okay. He had no idea our marriage was already underwater. That was the moment I truly gave up. He couldn't see me. He couldn't see how much pain I was in. After that, I stopped trying to get him to. Then I met our new friends, the other couple. The husband and I were both the primary caregivers during the day while our spouses worked. We started talking. It was that simple. We'd hang out while the kids played. We talked about how exhausting toddlers are, about bad TV shows, about what we wanted to be when we grew up. He actually listened. He would look at me when I spoke, and he'd see the dark circles under my eyes and say, "You look tired," instead of just looking straight through me. He made me laugh. For the first time in years, I felt like a real person. The text started innocently enough. A meme about parenting. A complaint about being nap-trapped. But it quickly turned into more. We started texting all day, every day. It was my secret world, my escape. He was the first person I talked to in the morning and the last one I talked to at night. The I love yous and the pet names just sort of happened. It wasn't planned. It was the language of two people who were starving for connection and had finally found it. It felt safe because it was just words on a screen. Of course, it didn't stay that way. His wife found the messages. The panic I felt was ice cold. When my husband confronted me, I lied. I downplayed it, said it was just a friendship that got a little weird. How could I explain that these messages were the only thing holding me together? How do you explain a hunger to someone who's never missed a meal? I even offered to show him the texts, a bluff, because I knew he wouldn't look. He trusted me, but it didn't feel like trust. It felt like he didn't care enough to even be suspicious. His wife demanded we stop all communication. My husband agreed. It felt like they were trying to take away my air supply. The secrecy that came next wasn't about being sneaky. It felt like a matter of survival. We downloaded a secret messaging app. We started talking on the phone late at night, whispering for hours when the whole house was dark and silent. It was crazy, it was reckless, but it was ours. It was the only thing that was just for me. I sent him pictures of myself, pictures in my underwear, pictures where I tried to look sexy. It sounds so sordid, I know, but it wasn't really about him. It was about me. It was proof that I was still a woman, someone desirable, and not just a tired mom in yoga pants. Each picture was me trying to see myself the way he saw me. The first time we kissed, it felt like something that was always going to happen. The physical affair was just the next logical step. Our hearts and minds had been in this for months. Our bodies were just catching up. Those afternoons at his house, when everyone was gone, were the only time I felt completely whole. The lies I had to tell to get there were horrible. The fake errands, the alibi I created with a girlfriend by taking a picture with her before I left to meet him. I hated that part. I hated the person I had to become to keep this one part of my life where I felt alive. But I was so desperate I was willing to pay the price. I had built this entire second life, this fragile bubble where I was seen and loved. And for a while I managed to keep my two worlds from touching. I thought I could handle it. I thought I had it under control. Then one afternoon I came home from the grocery store. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I put the bags down on the counter and called out for my husband. No answer. I walked through the house and I found him in our little home office. He was sitting in my chair at my desk looking at my laptop. The screen was on. He wasn't typing. He was just staring. He didn't turn around when I walked in, but I knew he'd heard me. The air in the room was thick and heavy and I couldn't breathe. My blood went cold. He knew. After a long, terrible silence, he slowly turned his head and looked at me. There wasn't any anger in his eyes. Not yet. It was just a hollow, shattered look. And in that moment I knew my world, both of them, had just been burned to the ground. "What did you find?" I asked, but my voice was a whisper. The words felt stupid as soon as they left my mouth. It was obvious what he'd found. My secret life was laid bare on that laptop screen. He didn't answer right away. He just swiveled the chair around to face me fully. The hollow look was still there, but now something else was creeping in around the edges. A cold, hard anger that was so much scarier than yelling would have been. "The pictures?" he finally said, his voice flat. I was looking for a tax document and saw a folder with his name on it. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. He gestured to the screen. Why would you do this?" My mind was racing, trying to find the words to explain years of loneliness in a single sentence. "I was lonely," I choked out. "You weren't here. You were never here." It sounded so weak, so pathetic. The classic cheater's excuse. A flicker of pain crossed his face. "I was working," he said, his voice rising just a little. "I was working to pay for this house. For our life. While I was killing myself at the hospital, you were doing this." He didn't need to say more. I knew what he was thinking. The betrayal wasn't just about the sex, it was about everything. And then he delivered the next blow. "His wife called me an hour ago," he said, and my stomach dropped through the floor. "She found your secret messages. The ones from the new app. She sent me the phone logs too, the calls at 4 a.m. The hours and hours on the phone. Do you know how that feels? To know you were whispering to another man while I was asleep in the bed next to you?" I had nothing to say. There was no defense. My secret world wasn't just mine anymore. It was being passed around, examined, judged. So I called him my husband, continued, his voice breaking. I called him and I asked him. And he told me everything. He looked at me, his eyes pleading now. He told me about the afternoons at his house. He told me it happened more than once. Tell me he's lying. Please. But I couldn't. I just stood there frozen as the truth settled into the room and suffocated us both. The affair wasn't a secret anymore. It was just a collection of ugly facts that had destroyed two families. The bubble hadn't just popped. It had exploded, and the shrapnel hit everyone. The days that followed were a living nightmare. We were ghosts in our own home, moving around each other, speaking only when we had to about the kids. The silence now was 1,000 times worse than the silence that had started all of this. It was heavy and filled with pain. We tried one session of marriage counseling. It was a disaster. The therapist wanted us to be honest, but honesty felt like a weapon. He wanted to know every detail, every text, every touch. He wanted to understand what I did, but he never asked why. He never tried to understand how we got there. He just saw what I had done, not the years of nothing that came before it. The breaking point came when the therapist suggested radical transparency. He wanted all my passwords, my phone, my email, my social media. My husband latched onto the idea immediately. He saw it as the only way to ever trust me again. I said no. I know how that sounds. It sounds like I was still hiding something. But I wasn't. It was all out in the open. For me, it was about something else. My entire life had been for him, for the kids, for the house. My phone, my private messages with my friends, my thoughts, that was the last little corner of the world that was just mine. Handing over the passwords felt like letting him colonize the last inch of my soul. It felt like agreeing to be a prisoner, to have my every thought monitored. I had already lost myself once in our marriage. I refused to do it again. My refusal was the final nail in the coffin. For him, it was proof I couldn't be trusted. For me, it was the first time I chose myself. The decision to separate was mutual, but it felt like a verdict he handed down to me. The day he helped me pack my things was surreal. I'd be folding a sweater and he'd be taping up a box, the silence between us filled with 5 years of memories. I saw our wedding photo on the mantelpiece, the one where we're both laughing young and so sure about forever. I didn't recognize either of us. I cried then. Not for the marriage we had at the end, but for the one we were supposed to have, the one that got lost somewhere between his job and my loneliness. I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt him, or our kids, or another family. I just wanted to feel alive. Now I have my own place. It's small and it's quiet. Sometimes the quiet is good. It's peaceful, other times it's just lonely. But it's a different kind of loneliness. This is the loneliness of starting over, not the loneliness of being invisible next to the person who is supposed to see you better than anyone else. I have the kids half the time. Seeing their little faces, knowing I blew up their world for my own selfish needs, is a pain I'll carry with me forever. That's the part that I can never justify. They didn't deserve any of this. I'm in therapy, just me, trying to figure out who I am when I'm not a wife or a mom or an object of someone's desire. I'm trying to learn how to feel whole, all on my own. It's hard. Some days I feel like I'm drowning in regret. But for the first time in a very long time, I feel like I can breathe. This new life is scary and uncertain, but it's mine. Every broken, messy piece of it is mine.
Story 12.
I'm sure my ex-husband painted a pretty clear picture of me. I'm the monster. The cheating wife who blew up our perfect life for nothing. And from his side of the street, he's not wrong. I did a terrible thing. But the story isn't just about the bomb. It's about the years of pressure building up before the explosion. We were that times couple in high school, the quarterback and the head cheerleader, a walking, talking cliché. We started dating when we were 16, and from that moment on, we were never just me and him. We were us. Everyone loved us. Our parents, our friends, our teachers. They saw our future mapped out like a perfect Hallmark movie marriage, a little house with a dog, a couple of kids. We followed the script because we didn't know there was any other way to live. We got married a year after graduation. I was 19 years old. I'd never been on a date with anyone else. I'd never even kissed anyone else. My entire life had been a straight line from my parents' house to his. I did love him. I need to be clear about that. He was my best friend, my whole world, but he was also my whole world. I didn't have a corner of it that was just for me. I was Mark's wife before I was ever really myself. My dreams got folded into his dreams. We wanted a house, so I worked as a receptionist to help save. He wanted to start his own business, so I learned bookkeeping. My identity was a support role in the movie of his life. And for a few years it was enough. But then a quiet, creeping feeling started to settle in. It felt like waking up in a room where the walls are slowly moving in. I'd look in the mirror and not recognize the woman staring back. Who was she? What did she like? What did she want? If you took Mark out of the equation, I had no idea. The silence in our perfect little house started to feel deafening. The pressure to keep being the happy, perfect wife was crushing me. Then I met someone at work. He was a sales rep from another company. He'd come in, make a few jokes, and talk to me. Not to Mark's wife, but to me. He asked about my day, my thoughts on a movie, what music I liked. Tiny, insignificant things that felt like a lifeline. It wasn't about love, not really. It was about being seen. He saw a woman, not a wife. And that attention was a drug. It was the first thing in my adult life that felt like it was mine and mine alone. A stupid, selfish, secret thing that I owned. It was a mistake, a catastrophic one, but it was the first real choice I ever made for myself. And of course it all came crashing down. Mark's boss let everyone go home early one afternoon because of a plumbing issue at their office. I heard the garage door open and my blood turned to ice. There was no time to fix anything, to hide anything. He walked into our bedroom and just stopped. The world didn't explode. It just went completely silent. The look on his face wasn't just anger. It was a shattering confusion, like I had just stabbed him in the heart, and he couldn't understand why the person who was supposed to love him most would do that. I'll never forget that look. I deserved it. I deserved all the screaming and yelling that followed. We tried to fix it. We went to counseling for months, but it never felt like we were healing. It felt like I was on probation. Every week the therapist would ask how I was working to rebuild trust. I had to be the perfect sorry wife. I cooked his favorite meals. I wore the dresses he liked. I agreed with everything he said. I was so terrified of losing the only life I'd ever known that I basically erased myself to make him feel safe. But the guilt and the pressure were 1,000 times worse than before. I was suffocating in the role of the penitent wife. I needed an escape. I started talking to an old friend from high school online, just messaging back and forth. He'd moved out of state years ago. It was innocent at first, just catching up, but it became an outlet. I could complain about the counseling, about how heavy the air in my own house felt. He didn't judge me. He just listened. It was a stupid, reckless thing to do, to have secrets again, when a secret was what broke us in the first place. But I couldn't stop. I needed that one tiny space where I wasn't the villain. The messages were on our shared desktop computer. I used it more, so I usually just stayed logged into my social media account. I'm not a complete idiot. I I knew it was a risk. In the last few weeks, things had gotten colder between Mark and me. The fake politeness was gone, replaced by a quiet, heavy tension. We were living like roommates who hated each other. He started using the computer in the evenings, staying up late after I went to bed. He said he was looking at new tools for his business, but he would click the screen off fast whenever I walked into the room. A knot of pure dread started twisting in my stomach. Then one night I went to get a glass of water and saw him sitting there in the dark, the screen glowing on his face. He didn't hear me come in. I saw my profile picture on the screen, the little chat window open. He was just scrolling up and up and up, reading everything. Every complaint, every private joke, every word I had said when I thought no one was looking. He didn't make a sound. He just sat there, bathed in the blue light of my betrayal, his shoulders perfectly still. He knew. I just backed away slowly and went back to bed. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. The next few days were the quietest, loudest days of my life. We didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about anything. We moved around each other in our small house like ghosts, the air thick with everything we weren't saying. I kept waiting for the explosion, for the screaming match, for him to throw a plate against the wall. But nothing happened. The silence was his weapon now, and it was cutting me to pieces. He was making me wait, letting me drown in my own guilt. That Sunday morning, I woke up and he was already dressed. Not in his usual lazy Sunday clothes, but in jeans and hiking boots. The dogs were bouncing around his feet, excited. He grabbed their leashes from the hook by the door. "I'm taking the dogs for a hike," he said, not looking at me. His voice was completely hollow. Empty. There was nothing in it, no anger, no sadness, just a flat, dead sound. I knew right then in my gut. This wasn't about a hike. My whole body went cold. I wanted to scream, to beg, to ask him where he was really going, but the words were stuck in my throat. I just stood there in the hallway watching him clip the leashes onto their collars. He opened the door, the dogs trotted out, and then he was gone. The door clicked shut. I didn't move until I heard his truck start and drive away. The second the sound of his engine faded, I fell apart. A full-on, can't-breathe panic attack. It was finally over. He had left me. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. I called my friend, the one I'd been messaging. He answered, and all I could do was sob into the phone. "He's gone," I choked out. "Mark's gone. He took the dogs and he's not coming back." He tried to calm me down, but I was hysterical. I was alone in this silent, empty house, and I was terrified. He lived about 30 minutes away and said he was coming over to make sure I was okay. That's who the neighbor saw. The male visitor. It wasn't a secret lover coming for a celebration. It was my friend walking into the middle of my world collapsing. He sat with me while I cried for an hour, made me a cup of tea I didn't drink, and then he left. The timing was damning, I know that. But the truth is, I was already alone. Mark didn't come back that night. The dog's water bowl was still full, his side of the bed was cold and empty. I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, and the panic slowly started to curdle. By the next morning, it wasn't fear anymore. It was pure, venomous rage. How dare he, after everything, after the counseling, after I groveled and begged and tried to piece us back together, he didn't even have the decency to break up with me to my face. He didn't fight, he didn't yell. He just vanished. He erased me. It felt like the ultimate judgment. It was him saying, "You are so worthless, you're not even worth a proper goodbye." He had taken away my home, my life, my identity as his wife, and now he was taking away my right to even be part of the ending. I snapped. I wanted to hurt him. I wanted him to feel 1 ounce of the crushing humiliation that I was feeling. I wanted to prove to him, and maybe to myself, that I wasn't just some pathetic little thing he could throw away. I was desirable. I was still a person. So I did the ugliest thing I've ever done. I went out, I sent him those texts, I took photos. It was a scorched earth campaign fueled by vodka and shame. Every text was a scream. Asterisk, you didn't break me. See, I don't need you. Someone else wants me. Asterisk. It was a lie. I was completely broken. But I would rather he think I was a monster than a victim. The next few years are a blur of bad decisions. I moved out of the house. We got divorced through lawyers. I never saw him in person again. I threw myself into a life I thought was freedom, but it was just chaos. I was trying so hard to be the opposite of the perfect little wife I had been that I didn't know who I was at all. The anger faded, and what was left was this deep, aching regret that settled into my bones. Years later, I was scrolling through Facebook and saw a picture his mom had posted. It was Mark at a family barbecue. He had his arm around a woman and he was smiling. A real smile, the kind that crinkled the corners of his eyes. The kind I hadn't seen in forever. He looked happy. Genuinely, truly happy. The old hatred I'd been holding on to was just gone. All I felt was this profound sadness for the boy I had loved and the man I had hurt so badly. On impulse, I sent him a message. I just said I knew it was out of the blue, but I was wondering if he'd ever be willing to meet for coffee. I told him I understood if the answer was no. I fully expected him to ignore it or tell me to go to hell. A day later, he replied, "Okay." We met at a Starbucks halfway between our towns. Seeing him walk in was surreal. He looked older, calmer. The anger was gone from his eyes. It was incredibly awkward at first. We talked about a lot of nothing work, the weather. Then I just took a deep breath and stopped the small talk. "Mark, I'm sorry," I said. "I didn't ask you here to make excuses. There are no excuses for what I did. I was immature and selfish, and I felt lost. I blew up our lives because I was too much of a coward to figure out who I was. You didn't deserve any of it. I laid it all out. The suffocation, the desperate search for an identity, the horrible, ugly way I lashed out at the end. I didn't try to make myself look better. I owed him the unvarnished truth. He just listened. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then I saw his eyes fill with tears. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick. I never understood why. We talked for another hour. He told me about his new wife, how they met. He told me he'd found his person. And I wasn't jealous. I was happy for him. Before we left, we gave each other an awkward hug. It felt like a decade of poison was being drawn out of me. He had moved on. He was happy. And in that moment, by finally taking responsibility for the monster I had been, I felt like I could finally start to find myself too.
Story 13.
My name is Fredo. I'm the kitchen manager, but that title doesn't mean anything. It's just what corporate puts on my paycheck. What I really am is the guy who makes this whole place run. General managers, they're a joke. They come and change the menu font, talk about synergy, and then they're gone in a year. I've been in this kitchen for 15 years. I've seen 6 of them come and go. I'm the constant. I'm the foundation. This isn't just a job for me. It's my life. The people in my kitchen, they're my family. I know their kids' names. I know when their rent is due. I know who they're sending money home to. These are good people, hard workers. A lot of them can't get a job anywhere else. Corporate wouldn't give them the time of day because they don't have the right pieces of paper. I don't care about paper. I care about loyalty. I give them a chance, a steady job, and in return my kitchen runs like a machine. We're fast, we're clean, and we make money. If I have to bend a few rules to make that happen, so what? The world is a tough place. I bring order to my little corner of it. Then Atlas Black showed up. He started as a server, one of those kids with too much energy who thinks he's smarter than everyone else. He was always asking questions, trying to learn every station, sticking his nose where it didn't belong. Eventually, he landed in the carryout department. Carryout is basically a parasite that lives on the kitchen. Their success is my success. If my kitchen is slow, they get complaints. So he was in my world now. He started calling himself the unofficial supervisor. He organized the other carryout kids, mostly teenagers and college students, and started acting like he was their union boss. He was always complaining. They needed more hours. They needed more people on the schedule. They needed a bigger cut of the tip pool. He didn't get it. He saw everything in black and white like it was a textbook. More hours for them meant higher labor costs for me. Higher labor costs meant I couldn't keep as many of my guys on the payroll. He was poisoning my people with ideas that sound good on paper but destroy you in reality. He was a populist, and he was starting to become a real problem. The new GM Harvey was a mess, but he wasn't an idiot. He cared about 2 things, money and women, and he saw that I made him a lot of the first one. So he mostly left me and my kitchen alone. But even he could hear the noise Atlas was making. We decided to hold a department meeting. The plan was to let the carryout kids vent, tell them we heard them, and then change nothing. It usually works. But Atlas had planned a coup. He had his little followers stand up one by one and complain about how I was cutting hours to save money. Of course I was. That's my job. Then the final move. One of them said, "We think Atlas should be the new manager. He knows what we need." They all nodded. I looked at Harvey. He looked at me. It wasn't an angry look. It was a look of understanding. This wasn't just a kid complaining anymore. This was a mutiny. Atlas had made his move, and now he was a direct threat to both of us. He had to go. It didn't take long. A few weeks later, I walked out of my office to do my nightly check. And there he was. Sitting in a booth, not even clocked in for his shift, yet stuffing his face with an order of our calamari fritti. It's one of our most expensive appetizers. There was no ticket on the table. I knew exactly what had happened. He'd gone back to the line, probably flashed a smile at one of the new nervous line cooks, and bullied him into making it for free. It was the exact kind of entitled rules don't apply to me crap he'd been preaching for months. I went and got Harvey. We walked over to the table together. He looked up, chewing without a hint of shame. "What's this atlas?" Harvey asked. He tried to spin some story about it being a canceled order that was going to be thrown out. A complete lie. A canceled order goes in the trash. It doesn't get delivered to your personal booth 10 minutes before your shift. It was perfect. It was clean. He broke one of the biggest rules in the book, you don't steal. We took him to the office and fired him on the spot. It wasn't a setup. He just finally got caught being the person he always was. The next day, the relief in the restaurant was huge. It was like we had cut out a tumor. When Atlas showed up in the middle of the dinner, rushed to collect his last paycheck and tips, I almost had to respect the nerve. I walked out, shook his hand, and told him no hard feelings. That's just business. You play the game, you take your risks. He took a risk and he lost. I never imagined that when I was shaking his hand, he had his phone in his pocket recording everything. A week later, a woman named Audrey showed up. She was from corporate, an auditor. She sat down with me and Harvey and played the recording. It was nothing. Just the last 30 seconds of our conversation in Harvey's office right after we fired Atlas. Harvey was saying something like, "Thank God that's over. I couldn't take another day of that kid," and I laughed and agreed. It was just two managers glad to be rid of a headache. But to a corporate suit like Audrey, it sounded bad. She saw conspiracy. To protect ourselves, Harvey and I had to be a team. But the pressure started to crack him. Audrey put him on a performance improvement plan, which is just corporate speak for you are about to be fired. He panicked. And he did something unbelievably stupid. He went on the company's public Facebook page and wrote a long post about how the recent management changes were because of others, not him, and hinted that I was the one running the restaurant into the ground. He drew first blood. I had no choice. I knew his secrets, just like he knew I wasn't perfect. I commented right back on his post. I didn't even have to say much. Just a simple, interesting take, Harvey. Maybe you should spend less time messaging the 19-year-old hostesses and more time reading the profit and loss reports. That was the spark that lit the whole forest on fire. The post blew up. Other employees past and present started chiming in. Audrey launched a full-blown investigation into Harvey. The girls he'd been harassing finally felt safe enough to talk. 2 weeks later, he was gone. Fired for sexual harassment. I thought it was over. The two biggest problems, Atlas and Harvey, were gone. The storm had passed. But the next morning, Audrey called me into the office again. She closed the door. There was no one else in the room. She wasn't smiling. "Fredo," she said, sliding a thick folder across the table. "With Harvey gone, I've decided to take a closer look at your kitchen's operations. Let's start with your employee files." I stared at the folder she pushed across the table. Employee files. It was such a simple, boring phrase. To her, it was just paperwork. To me, it was a box of dynamite with a lit fuse. Everything I had built, every person I was protecting was in that folder. My whole system was based on corporate, not looking too closely. Now the Eye of Sauron was staring right at it. "Most of that is handled by HR now," I said, trying to sound casual. "I just keep the basics. Schedules, emergency contacts." Audrey smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. It was the smile of a cat who has a mouse cornered. "I'm sure." But corporate policy requires GMs and KMs to maintain duplicate files on site. Let's just make sure everything is compliant. She opened the folder and started pulling out files, one by one. She was methodical, quiet. For the next week, that became my life. I'd run the morning prep and then she'd call me into the office. She'd hold up a file. This social security number has one too many digits, Fredo. Probably just a typo, right? Or, it's interesting. 6 of your dishwashers all live at the same address. Is it a boarding house? I had answers for everything. Clerical errors. They're roommates. It saves them money. The language barrier makes filling out forms difficult. My excuses got thinner every day. The pressure was immense. I could feel the trust in the kitchen starting to break. My guys saw me walking into that office with her every day. They saw the look on my face when I came out. They started asking questions I couldn't answer. The family I'd built was starting to look at me not as a protector, but as a liability. The order I'd worked so hard to maintain was cracking. The end came on a Tuesday. It was the middle of the lunch rush. The ticket machine was screaming, pans were sizzling, I was yelling out orders. It was chaos, but it was my chaos. Controlled. Then the back door opened and 2 men in dark suits walked in. They didn't look like health inspectors or food salesmen. They moved with a quiet authority that sucked all the noise out of the room. The pans stopped sizzling. The cooks froze. One of the men looked at me. "Are you Fredo?" he asked. His voice was calm, but it cut through the silence like a knife. I just nodded. "We need you to come with us." The walk from the line to my office was the longest walk of my life. Every single person in that kitchen, my people, my family, watched me go. I could see the fear in their eyes. They knew. When we got to the office, Audrey was sitting there. She didn't look triumphant, just tired. The men identified themselves. FBI. They said they had found evidence of a criminal enterprise involving the procurement of fraudulent government documents. A black market for workers. They laid it all out. They knew about my contact. They knew how the system worked. They had everything. Audrey hadn't just been looking at my files. She had been sending copies to federal investigators for weeks. I was a dead man walking, and I never even knew it. They gave me a choice. I could be the kingpin of a human trafficking operation, or I could be a cooperating witness. It wasn't really a choice at all. So I talked. I gave them the names. I know how that sounds. People will say I sold my own people out to save myself. But they weren't there. They didn't see the years I was looking at. The feds were going to find them anyway, with or without my help. At least this way, I could try to control the fallout. I told myself I was just managing the situation one last time. But when I saw the faces of my guys as they were led away later that week, I knew I had failed them. The one thing I was supposed to do, protect them, I couldn't. The system I built to keep them safe became the trap that caught them all. In the end, everyone points a finger. Harvey was a predator. Fredo was a criminal. But they missed the beginning. They missed the cause. This all started because of one person, Atlas Black. He came in with his bright eyes and his big ideas about fairness and doing things the right way. He didn't see the delicate ecosystem I had built. He didn't see the people who depended on it. He just saw rules being broken and decided he had to be the hero who fixed it. He complained about hours, so I fired him. He got his revenge with a recording. That recording brought Audrey. Audrey dug into Harvey and got him fired. With Harvey gone, she turned on me. Her investigation brought the FBI. And the FBI destroyed everything. It was a chain reaction, and Atlas was the one who lit the first match. He probably thinks he won. He probably tells people the story of how he, a humble carry-out kid, took down a corrupt management team. He probably sleeps well at night thinking he brought justice to that restaurant. But what he calls justice, I call destruction. He didn't save anyone. My guys didn't get better jobs. Most of them were probably deported. The waitresses Harvey harassed were out of work when the restaurant's reputation went down the toilet. The whole place I spent 15 years of my life building was gutted and left to rot. All because one kid couldn't stand not being the star of his own movie. He wanted to be a hero, so he burned the whole world down and called the ashes justice.
Story 14.
I'm sure I'm going to be called a lot of things for what I did. A horrible mother, a cougar, a home wrecker, even though the only home I wrecked was my own. But I need you to understand something. The world starts to shrink when you get to my age. After the divorce, after my son grew up and started his own life, my world got very, very small. It was my house, my job, the grocery store, and my son's visits on Sunday. You stop being a person. You become a role. I was a mother. To my son, I was his rock, the one constant thing in his life he could always count on. I love being that for him, I do. But a rock doesn't get lonely. A rock doesn't lie awake at night wondering if anyone will ever touch her again. A rock doesn't remember being young and full of fire and wonder where that person went. I was tired of being a rock. I was tired of being invisible. I downloaded Tinder. Not for anything serious, and honestly, not even for sex at first. It was more like an experiment. I just wanted to see if anyone out there could still see times me asterisk. The woman, not the mom. I put up a few recent photos, wrote a short bio, and held my breath. And then he messaged me. We can call him Blee Bluepo. He was young, funny, and direct. He wasn't looking for a relationship, he was just looking for a good time. No formalities, his profile said. To me, that sounded like freedom. We talked for a few days, and the conversation was so easy. He didn't ask about my son or my ex-husband or my mortgage. He asked what music I liked and what I liked to drink. He told me I had a great smile. For the first time in over a decade, a man looked at me, even just my picture, with simple, uncomplicated desire. We met for a drink and the chemistry was immediate. We went back to my place. It was thrilling and a little terrifying. For the next 3 months, he was my secret. Once or twice a week, he would come over after my son was gone for the night. We'd have a glass of wine talk, and then we'd end up in my bedroom. In those hours, I wasn't a mother. I wasn't an ex-wife. I wasn't the quiet lady in accounting. I was just a woman alive and wanted, and completely in control. It was my escape, and it made me feel like myself again. The fantasy came crashing down on a Friday afternoon. My son had decided to treat me to lunch, which was one of those sweet things he does that makes my heart ache with love for him. He was telling me about work, about his friends, about a girl he was sort of seeing, normal stuff. I was sitting there, smiling and nodding, feeling like the world's biggest hypocrite. He was talking about his coworkers, and he mentioned Blue Po's name. He said the guy was a bit of a player, always telling these wild stories about his latest hookup. I just nodded, my stomach twisting into a cold, hard knot. When he pulled into my driveway after lunch, my heart stopped. There, parked a few houses down, was a familiar silver sedan. His car. Blue Po's car. He was early. He was supposed to wait for my text. My blood ran cold. My two separate lives, the two halves of my carefully constructed self, were parked on the same street. "What's he doing here, my son?" asked squinting. He recognized the car. "That's Blue Po." Before I could say anything, my son was out of the car and walking toward him. "Stay here, Mom," he said, like he was protecting me from something. I rushed inside, my hands shaking, and peered through the living room curtains. I saw my son knock on the driver's side window. I saw Blue Po jump looking like a deer in the headlights. The confident, charming man who knew every inch of my body was gone. In his place was a scared little boy who looked like he was about to be sick. I couldn't hear their words, but I saw the whole pathetic performance. Blue Po stumbling out of his car, gesturing vaguely down the street. My son looking confused, pointing back toward our house. Then my son laughed a short, disbelieving sound and clapped him on the shoulder before walking back to me. He came inside, shaking his head. "That was so weird," he said, dropping his keys on the counter. He said he was lost, looking for his cousin's house on Oak Street. There is no Oak Street in this neighborhood. I told him that, and he just got all flustered and said his GPS must be messed up. He lied. To my son. To his friend. On my front lawn. And in that one instant, our secret little affair stopped being my escape. It became sordid. Cheap. The lie he told wasn't just to protect himself. It was to hide times me asterisk. I wasn't a vibrant, desirable woman he was seeing. I was a source of shame, a dirty secret he had to invent a pathetic story to cover up. I felt disgusting. My phone buzzed in my purse, and then buzzed again, and again. A frantic stream of messages. Asterisk. Don't say anything. Asterisk. Asterisk. Please. Call me when he's gone. Asterisk. Asterisk. My job. Our friendship. Please just keep quiet. Asterisk. My son was in the kitchen getting a glass of water, completely oblivious. "You want one, Mom?" he asked. I pulled out my phone. Another message from Blue Po came through. Asterisk. He can't find out. I've told him stuff. Details. He'll put it together. Asterisk. He was worried about the details. Suddenly I felt a hot flash of pure rage. The nights I thought were intimate, the moments I thought were adventurous and just for us, had been turned into locker room stories for him to brag about to his friends. To my son. I was just his conquest. His story. "Mom," my son said, walking back into the living room. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I looked up from the phone at his kind, worried face. My wonderful boy who saw me as a rock. The boy Blue Po had been laughing about me with. The choice wasn't even a choice anymore. I would not be a dirty story. I would not be a source of shame. I took a deep, shuddering breath, my decision hardening into something solid and sharp in my chest. "Son," I said, my voice steadier than I expected, "sit down. We need to talk." He sat on the edge of the armchair, the one he'd always loved because it was big enough for him to curl up in when he was a kid. He looked so much like his father in that moment, his brow furrowed with concern. "Talk about what? Is everything okay?" I couldn't sugarcoat it. I couldn't wrap it in a pretty lie to make it easier for him. The whole point was to stop the lying. "Bleed Blupo," I said the name, feeling like poison in my mouth. He wasn't lost. He wasn't looking for his cousin. My son's confusion deepened. "Okay. So what was he doing here?" I took a breath and just ripped the Band-Aid off. "He was here to see me. We've been seeing each other for about 3 months." The words hung in the air between us, thick and ugly. I watched his face as he processed them. It was like watching a computer program try to run a command it didn't understand. The confusion didn't morph into anger, not at first. It turned into a kind of blank, hollow disbelief. Seeing each other, he repeated slowly, like he was tasting a foreign word. Like dating. Not. Dating I managed. It was casual. Physical. That was the word that broke the spell. Asterisk. Physical asterisk. His face crumpled. I saw the exact moment the pieces clicked together in his head. The wild stories he told me about at lunch. The bragging. The details. His friend had been telling him stories about his own mother. A wave of nausea washed over him. I could see it in the way the color drained from his face. He looked from me to the window, then back to me, his eyes wide with a kind of horror I had never seen before. The stories he told us," he whispered. "The older woman he was hooking up with. The fine-ass cougar." He choked on the words, unable to finish. He stood up, pacing the small living room like a caged animal. He ran a hand through his hair, his whole body vibrating with a mix of shame and rage. "All this time, you let me come home and talk about him?" he finally asked, his voice cracking. "You let me laugh about his stupid stories, and it was you times the whole time." "I didn't know he was telling you anything," I said, my own voice rising. "I had no idea until he texted me just now. Do you think I would have let that happen?" "Why him?" he demanded, ignoring my question. "Of all the men in the world, why my friend, my co-worker?" "It wasn't supposed to be like this," I said, feeling my composure finally start to break. "It was just something for me. It had nothing to do with you. I met him on an app. I didn't even know who he was until our first date, and by then what he spat. It was too good to stop." I didn't have an answer for that, because maybe it was true. He just stood there staring at me, and the look in his eyes was the worst part. He wasn't just looking at his mom anymore. He was looking at a stranger. A woman who had secrets and a life he knew nothing about, and he hated it. He looked utterly and completely betrayed. Without another word, he walked to the door, grabbed his keys from the counter, and left. The slam of the front door echoed in the silent house. My phone, which had been buzzing with Bleeblupo's panicked text just minutes before, was completely quiet. The pleas had stopped. He knew. He must have seen my son storm out and put two and two together. The silence from him was more damning than any angry message could have been. I was alone with the mess I had made. The next few days were the longest of my life. I sent my son a few texts. Asterisk, are you okay? Can we please talk? I love you. Asterisk, they all went unanswered. The house felt huge and empty. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like an accusation. Then on Tuesday I got a single short message from him. Asterisk, I quit my job today. Couldn't stand to look at him. I'll get my last few things from the house this weekend. Asterisk. My heart sank. That was the one outcome I hadn't truly let myself consider. I had been so focused on my own dignity, on refusing to be a secret, that I hadn't thought about the real-world consequences for my son. I'd broken his friendship, yes, but I'd also pushed him out of his job, a job he liked. A wave of guilt so powerful it almost buckled my knees, washed over me. I sat on my bed and cried, not for my lost affair or my shattered fantasy, but for the pain I had caused my son. He came that Saturday while I was out getting groceries, just as he said he would. When I got home, his old video game console was gone from the living room and a few boxes were missing from his childhood bedroom. He didn't want to see me. He couldn't even stand to be in the same house with me. It took 2 weeks before he spoke to me again. He showed up for our usual Sunday dinner, but nothing was usual about it. The easy chatter we used to share was gone, replaced by a thick, awkward silence. He answered my questions in single words. He didn't ask me anything about my week. He just ate his food staring at his plate, and I could feel him looking at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. He was studying me, trying to reconcile the woman in front of him with the mother he thought he knew. The affair is over. Bleeblupo vanished from my life as quickly as he entered it. My relationship with my son is fractured, maybe permanently. There's a distance between us now that feels like a canyon. I know I hurt him, and that regret is a heavy weight I will carry forever. But as I watch him across the dinner table, I see something else in his eyes too. Confusion, yes. Hurt, absolutely. But he sees times me. For the first time, he is looking at me not as the rock, not as the static, reliable figure of Mom, but as a complete person. A flawed, complicated sexual person who makes mistakes. I didn't do it to hurt him. I did it because I couldn't stand being a caricature in a story told behind my back. I couldn't be someone's dirty little secret, especially not to my own son. The price was terribly high, and my home is much quieter now. But it is my home. I am not hiding anymore. And I will not be anyone's story but my own.